What is going on, you guys? It is the ASTROLABE, brought to you by King Pilled. This is the ASTROLABE PM edition. I woke up this morning with a bunch of work I needed to try to get crammed in and a splitting headache, and there was just no way that I could possibly get my brain up to both get all the work done and make the show. But fortunately, I have an absolutely wonderful wife. And she took time out of everything she was doing to sit there and rub on the old shoulders for a little while, and that helped a lot. Helped to chill out all of the nerves and such. Let me see. Okay. So I'm here, and this is not the first time you're going to see me today. I may have gotten a late start, but I'm going to be doing the ASTROLABE here, and then at 7 p.m. Central tonight, I'm going to be on the Old Glory Club, and we're going to be talking about current events. And right now, I can say current events, and that has very, very particular meaning. I wonder how long this is going to last. Like, I wonder how long we're going to have this sense of being in the happenings. There's a spirit in the air, and I know that there's plenty of the world that doesn't feel that spirit, but we do. If you're here listening, if you're, I presume, if you're in the little section of the world that I tend to occupy, things are happening. There is a something about right now that we can all talk about, and we can evaluate, we can analyze, we can seek to understand, and most of all, we can just experience it. And it's incredibly real. It's not necessarily something you can just put like pin down and say this thing. It's just you could fill textbook after textbook after textbook after textbook with all the different theories of all the different factors that play into all the different various vectors that are coming together to produce this experience. And it's interesting. I wonder how long it's going to last. I remember having this sort of feeling a little bit in 2016, and then also in early 2020, and then in late 2021, or late 2020 going into 2021. There was kind of that sense of kind of like, oh man, anything could happen. We're on the precipice of history. And then eventually it just kind of, you don't like really notice it going away. You just kind of look around one day and you're sort of like, huh, things have been kind of just moseying along for the last little while. And then there's entire cottage industries that are built up to say, where's the next thing coming? When is the next happening going to happen? Oh, it's going to happen here. No, it's going to happen here. By this point, it'll be happening. There's this strange human impulse to go and try to predict when that thing's coming. For whatever reason, we like it. We want to have it. We like living in interesting times. Now, at the same time, it's kind of like we like living in interesting times because when we're experiencing interesting times, we feel really motivated to make not interesting times. Like after a little while, all the instability and unpredictability, like we couldn't stay like this forever. These things have to rise and fall naturally. Eventually, people just don't have the stomach for it, which is why at that moment, there's some critical moment where the collective spirit in the midst of a happening decides they don't want a happening anymore. So in early 2021, we saw this. Right as everything was beginning to climax, right as it was hitting the pivotal moment, everyone just kind of stopped and waited to see what everyone else was going to do. And then just in lockstep, everyone just settled around a narrative, and it didn't matter how insane it was. It didn't matter what evidence there was against that narrative. Everyone just coalesced around it and moved in lockstep forward. So presumably, something like that is going to happen again. If we're trying to understand these happenings and be able to predict their duration and their magnitude, then we need to study the past happenings. So early 2021 was definitely a happening. And what happened in early 2021? Everything just coalesced. Just overnight, everything. There was all sorts of conversations. Everything was up in the air. People were asking questions, and there was initiatives, and there was campaigning, and there was all this stuff. And then almost overnight, basically right around the inauguration, and like the week after that, everything just, it all went away. And so it's kind of like everyone just sort of, like everyone stopped, waited to see what everyone else is going to do, and then everyone sort of made a move at the same time. They all happen to make the same move. So it sort of, it has the appearance of coordination, and there's definitely people who are working to create that coordination because everyone lockstepped behind a narrative. And there was people who were pushing that narrative and wanted that narrative to be the predominant one. And everyone settled in on that narrative. But they didn't settle in on that narrative because those people just advocated hard enough or something. They settled in behind that narrative because there was the ready apparent of the ability to enforce that narrative present behind it. People naturally, subconsciously just chose the narrative that implied the most amount of force available to enforce it. This is how the collective human mind settles in behind a narrative, latches into it, and embodies it. It's this subconscious sense of force. So as we're building up to another one of these sorts of happenings that happens to mirror the last happening very closely, the question will be, when one of those moments happens again, where does the unconscious bias drive people? That's going to be a product of both like explicit messaging and implicit messaging. When this sort of thing is being triangulated subconsciously by the human mind, it draws on both what's there and what's not there to make that determination. And that determination is also not always accurate. And when that determination is not accurate, when everyone subconsciously settles behind the option that may not have the most force available to enforce it, that's when you get war. So you want there to be a very clear sense of what that force capacity is and which narrative possesses the greatest capacity to enforce itself. You want that to be really, really evident as possible. The force doesn't actually have to be generated itself. It just has to exist in potentiality. And if it exists in that potentiality, people will sense it. They'll fall behind it. So I'm speaking pretty abstractly here for a lot of reasons, because I also want to make clear I'm not directly implying anything here either. I'm trying to describe the landscape as I see it, but I don't have the answer to it directly. I have my suppositions. I have what I believe is going to happen, and I do think that there's an element here, if you understand that it's in your interest, it's in my interest personally and my people's interest personally, that I advocate loudly and strongly for a particular narrative. The exact details of the truth of that narrative aren't meaningless, but they're also not as important as I think people may think. The narrative can correspond truly to reality without it corresponding one-to-one with the facts of reality. This is a both and. Both of these things have to exist concurrently with one another. The rationalist part of my mind wants to say, no, it has to be, we have to reduce to one, reduce to one, reduce to one. But sometimes you reduce to two. And sometimes you reduce to more than two. And that's as far as you can reduce it. So I want to advocate for the narrative that I would prefer things to settle around. This is the revelation. As people begin to sense this, people begin advocating for the narrative that they want. They're like, wait a second, I actually kind of have a voice in this. What I put out could have some impact on some scale. So the costs of advocating for that narrative are diminishing, meaning the social pressure against openly advocating and desiring another Trump presidency are going away. So it's becoming cheaper and cheaper to make that expression. So I'm going to make that expression because I want that outcome. And now I see plausibly how that outcome can happen. And I recognize that ultimately what it's going to come down to is the weight of public sentiment. And public sentiment isn't something that each person possesses an equal share of. Some people's sentiment matters more than others. Because public sentiment is based on public sentiment. People use public sentiment, their perception of it, to calibrate what they believe their perception of public sentiment is. $20 super chat from Tom Masiero. He says, RFK Jr. endorsement happening tonight, lads. Buckle up. Oh, that would be very interesting. RFK Jr. endorsing Trump would be very interesting. It's funny. I've kind of assumed all along that that's what's going to happen. I don't think that RFK Jr. is going to run against him, because if RFK Jr. ran against him, he would. This was the electoral case for RFK Jr. as VP, is that if he ran a legitimate campaign against him, then that would make a dent. You can argue about why would hypothetical RFK voters even vote for Biden. I think there's a lot of hypothetical RFK voters who would vote for Biden, or vice versa. Either way. So I think there's a good chance that that RFK would have taken from either side. So having him endorse Trump just throws that much more weight behind him. Because when it comes down to it, when you have people I'm talking about this, like everyone's kind of collectively freezes for a moment. They wait to see what everyone else is going to do before they act. They're selecting a narrative. You want those narratives to be as narrow as possible. Ideally, you want one, because you want everyone to just settle on one narrative. But sometimes you want two. But you would rather have two than three. All these things are not equal. You have to. I'm realizing more and more. I lost control of myself a little bit and went off on the libertarians this afternoon, which I haven't done for a while. But just having a conversation with people and like realizing how deeply set into people the presumptions of egalitarianism are. Even people who seem to be, and may even actively believe themselves to be anti-egalitarian, they're anti-egalitarian in an egalitarian fashion. So I said stuff I probably shouldn't have. It wasn't worth it. I baited a bunch of people out so I could block them. So I got something out of it. I don't remember what I was going to say that. Just the egalitarianism. Like these things are 1 and 2 and 3, and the move from 1 to 2 and the move from 2 to 3. These are not all equal. Each of these numbers has characteristics unto itself that the other numbers don't. So when you're thinking of people in numeric terms, it's people think in like way too low resolution of a way. They're not taking in enough data and nuancing it properly. But anyways, Duffhead. yeah, that was when I stuck my dick in the hornet's nest, and I probably didn't need to. Michael Robertson said, apparently Elon might be speaking at the RNC. I saw Elon said he was not. It was a rumor that was going around for a little bit, but Elon himself tweeted out and said he's not going to be there. Omegas 13 says, doubt RFK endorsement coming. If he really wanted Trump to win, he would stay in the race and pull votes for Biden. Yeah, see, I don't know that would be completely the case. I think there are plenty of people who would rather vote for RFK than Trump, because they're the people who are in this weird middle ground where they like recognize the regime for what it is, but they also still kind of live in that idealism la la land where you just say, well, no, I'm going to do this. I don't like these two options, so I'm going to do this third thing instead. And it's like, that doesn't, I'm just going to vote for it. I recognize what time it is. I see how important this moment is, and I'm not going to throw away my vote on some guy I don't believe in. Just the balance, it just, there's too much I dislike about the things he says and does. And, Biden, at least he's experienced and he's got professionals around him. There's still people like that. It's weird. These are almost like the worst people possible. Like the closer you get to the thing without, like, it's really good to be able to get close to the thing. That's why it's valuable to have elites defect. It's really good to be closer to the thing, but the closer you get to the thing, the clearer your vision is required to be. If you're really close to the thing, but you can't see it all, that's worse than being really far from the thing and being able to see it clearly. Because there's nothing you can do, nothing you can do about that. These are basically the normies. And really, I mean, there's still 4 months. So a lot of things can happen. Many dramatic things have already happened, and a lot of things can happen. And I was thinking last night that we need to be bracing ourselves for how quickly the public narrative is going to forget about the assassination. It's going to lose sight of the emotional impact of the assassination attempt. It's going to happen. It's already beginning to happen. Where you have that emotional rise from it, it's already starting to dissipate, and there's a lot of people who are almost like oblivious. They're kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. You know, it was like, yeah, it was a big event, but people weren't really affected that much. And you know, look at the numbers. The numbers didn't really change. You know, people basically already had their minds made up, and so that sentiment is going to start rolling out, and it's going to be really easy to get really riled up about that. Because for many people, it was profoundly emotional. And that doesn't just go away. That leaves an imprint on you. It lasts. So, I'm just saying, that's going to come. When it comes, I told you it was coming. And try not to let it affect you too much. Just steal your way through it. I think it's good to keep that emotion high, but you don't want that emotion getting completely artificial, where you're just doing it for the sake of doing it, rather than, you know, moving forward. Couple real quick things here. Do me a favor, hit like. Got 53 watching and 24 likes. And you're welcome to send a super chat, or you can become a member of the King Pilled. That allows me to keep doing this. Makes it, I'm enjoying doing this a lot more and being a lot more active on Twitter and everything. I just need, you know, I got to manage my time. So the more income I can generate for doing this, the more I can do it, which is what I really want. So you can also, the best way to support the show would be to join the King Pill Discord, and that's what you get the most out of. So if you want a fantastic group of like-minded people, very tight-knit, and who aren't strictly dedicated to political talk, there's also religious conversations, there's science and technology and careers and parenting and homesteading and a whole bunch of different things in there. We do weekly schizo streams where we just pick some sort of schizo topic. I gather a couple, drop them in there, have people vote on which one they want to watch, and then we just do a voice chat and we sit there and all watch it together. So it's supposed to be kind of like you're going down into the man cave and kicking back and getting a beer and sitting and watching something weird and amusing with your friends. So if that sounds like something you'd want to be a part of, go to kingpill.com and sign up. We're not going to be able to do the schizo stream this week unless someone else wants to do it. Anybody else who you should be able to just go in and share the screen. So anyone else who wants to organize or coordinate it, if you want to do that, you're more than welcome to. I won't be able to make it because I'm going to be busy every evening this week. But yeah, so, and then the last thing was, this evening, 7:00, Old Glory Club. I'll be on there talking with the guys, and should be a good time. So I woke up, first of all, I shared the wrong one first. This was the first one that I saw when I woke up this morning. When I hopped on Twitter, David Sachs. Obviously, you guys know David Sachs. We've talked about him a lot here as one of the core PayPal Mafia guys that I've been tracking for quite a while now. Host of the All In podcast. He's been the most ardent vocal Trump supporter for the longest of these guys. He was putting pressure on Elon in a kind of a public social way a long time ago. So he says, as J.D. Vance described the factory workers who had lost their jobs because of the policies of Joe Biden and the other Washington insiders, I was reminded of this part of a speech I heard 32 years ago at another Republican convention. My friends, these people are our people. They don't read Adam Smith or Edmund Burke, but they come from the same schoolyards and the same playgrounds and towns as we come from. They share our beliefs and convictions, our hopes and our dreams. They are the conservatives of the heart. They are our people, and we need to reconnect with them. We need to let them know how bad they're hurting. They don't expect miracles of us, but they need to know we care. For too long, Republican leaders ignored Pat Buchanan's advice. They didn't reconnect with everyday Americans. They were foolishly willing to cut Social Security or Medicare in order to fund forever wars. They were led by warmongers like Dick Cheney and Mitch McConnell, or soulless bean counters like Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. Those days are over. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are conservatives of the heart. The Republican Party isn't going back. And then Eric Prince. This is funny. You had a lot of guys who were like mega blackpilling because because Donald Trump picked Vance instead of Eric Prince. Oh, who would have been better? Oh, Eric Prince. First of all, he's just going to pick some random guy. There's an available people who are qualified and the type of person who would do the job. And one of the requirements is wanting to do it. Eric Prince would turn it down if someone offered it to him. He does not want to be vice president. But he seems to be very, very happy about J.D. Vance as vice president, which would be obvious if you followed him for any amount of time. It's very, very clear that J.D. Vance would be his preferred vice president. So Eric Prince is very happy about it. So if it's good enough for Eric Prince, and he's the guy you would have preferred, then is it not good enough for you? He says, I'm very proud to say I was district chairman for Pat Buchanan's 92 campaign. He was right back then and still is now. Now, of course, everyone's very cynical about David Sachs. I shouldn't say everyone. I should say a very vocal, what I believe is a minority. A very vocal minority are very cynical about him. And I can understand that cynicism. I recognize all the markers are there for that. But the data that you need to be drawing on here is not material, rational data. It's irrational data. Let's say there's a heavy overlap between right-wing, dissident, transgressive young men and autism. And one of the things about autism, and I'm not saying this to shitpost, I'm saying this with all sincerity, one of the hallmarks of autism is not getting people, not understanding the vibe, not being able to read emotion or understand things like collective public sentiment. It's just kind of a foreign thing that's just like, oh yeah, that stuff out there that doesn't matter. But this stuff matters. And the significance of having a Silicon Valley lib publicly champion Pat Buchanan is profound. To do this cynically would take a tremendous amount of balls. And there's a deep irony here, and that what Pat Buchanan is saying is, we who are in the governing elite need to recognize that the people who are not part of our culture, we are still responsible for them. We need to care for them. We need to provide for them. We need to have a healthy patronage relationship with them. He's not saying this is my culture. He's saying I recognize we don't share a culture, but I want to throw my significant resources behind this man who you value and cherish because he represents you, and I recognize you're unrepresented, so I'm going to offer my assets to you to represent you, to represent your interests. In return, I'll get more power than I have today, and you'll get more power than you have today. This is a classic political patronage move. And these fucking black pillars who've been demanding patronage are just spitting at it when it's offered to them. And then they wonder why they never get any of it. You don't have the humility to recognize that you do not have political patronage right now. You are weak. You are weak, which makes you ripe for the picking, to be patronized by those who do not have your interests, but who don't have to try to sell themselves to you very hard because you're not thinking. You're just reacting. You're just emoting. Like a woman. The thing is, when a woman does that, she's good at it. And it gets her places. When you do that, you're bad at it. And it does not get you places. We are being offered patronage. It is madness to say, no, I don't want elite patronage. I just want to throw myself at the regime. I just want to go run into the walls and expect them to fall down. Like if we get enough people to just go sprint into the wall, it's just going to fall down. No, it's not. You're just going to wind up with a cracked skull. Another very similar example today. Elon Musk. George Mack here says, the most under-discussed immigration policy, a message from Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew, the former leader of Singapore, used to obsess over the airport experience in the first few miles to the city. Why? It is the onboarding experience for talented future citizens. The airport drive and the airport experience is the first and last impression of a location. Ask any stand-up comedian. People remember the beginning and the end. Lee Kuan Yew used to inspect Singapore airport. Cleanliness of the toilet, speed of the immigration queues, success rate of the luggage handling, everything had to be top-notch. He'd make the trains run on time. He would regularly get feedback on how to improve the drive from the airport to the city. The goal was to wow new visitors in the first few miles with the beauty of Singapore. Create an onboarding experience so magical they question why they aren't living there. Singapore went from a third world country to a first world country in one generation. It now has a greater GDP per capita than its former imperial power, the United Kingdom. Countries should obsess over their onboarding experience like startups do. This attention to detail goes a long way in attracting talented immigrants. As I arrived at Austin Airport and had to climb through 3 sweaty indoor parking lots to find my Uber, I couldn't help but think Lee Kuan Yew wouldn't approve of this. There's so much talk about immigration policy. There's such little talk about onboarding experiences for future citizens. Create magic moments and retain talented immigrants. Elon Musk says he was brilliant. So now in one day, in the space of a couple of hours, we have David Sachs publicly lionizing Pat Buchanan and Elon Musk weighing in about the brilliance of Lee Kuan Yew, specifically talking about an elite class that actively seeks to make the trains run on time. They are signaling to you why they have thrown their weight behind President Trump. And that weight is the people who are just like, oh, it's the tech bros. This is why I tweeted what I did 2 days ago or something about the takeover of X. The takeover of Twitter and making it into X. How that was done, the type of cooperation and cover fire that it required, the resources that it required, and the ballsiness to go after that, and the significance to which it's changed things. Elon Musk is not just like some tech guy. Oh, he survives off of government contracts, so... No, you don't understand. He owns those government contracts. He owns them. Why? Because the people who own him have the capacity to enforce those government contracts. Am I making myself clear? Elon Musk is not some lone tech bro. Elon Musk is a front for very, very powerful interests who are using him as a vector to execute a very rapid move in the direction of the American government. And this is what they're signaling about the direction they want things to go. These are the people who they're listening to. These are the people who they're holding up as the type of person they want to emulate. Regardless of whatever foibles they may have, because clearly they do. Regardless of those other foibles, these are incredibly powerful signals. Because of also what the other things that they signal happening behind the scenes. In order for something like this to happen, these aren't just isolated blips on a timeline. These are like, I saw a great analogy that it said something about occasionally when the tide goes out, you see who's been swimming around been swimming around naked. So this is like a tide going out moment. The tide's going out, and we're seeing who's swimming around naked and who's not. So to be blackpilling in this moment is you're signaling your spiritual incompetence. You're basically just saying, I'm oblivious to a fundamental part of reality. I don't know how people work. I'm just possessed by my emotions. That's what you're signaling. This is why there is a mounting campaign against blackpilling, and I am very, very happy to carry this banner. No fucking blackpilling. This is part of the patronage relationship. You want patronage? This is how it works. You don't blackpill about your patrons. Be a good client. Accept the patronage when it's being offered to you. Oh, but it comes with strings attached. It always does. If you want to be the one controlling those strings, make yourself a patron and go find some clients. But for now, you're being offered patronage. Take it. This is why you don't blackpill. Because blackpilling is saying, my patrons are incompetent and retarded. And I don't trust in them. I'm taking advantage of them. And you know what happens when you take advantage of your patrons and your patrons cease being your patrons? Then they stop representing your interests. And they're more inclined to just represent their own. Might as well. I made overtures to these people. I wanted to work with them. They just spit at me. All right, fuck them. Go die in a ditch. If you want that response out of your potential patrons, then by all means, continue blackpilling. But you've now become the enemy. You have joined the enemy class. We're being offered patronage right now. We can hash out the details later on. Sometimes when someone offers a contract to you, the terms aren't great. You know, like, oh man, that's a really high interest rate. Man, that's that term's longer than I want it to be. But you know what? Sometimes those are the only people who will offer a contract to you. And you don't have to sign that contract. You could choose not to, but then you can't complain that nobody will offer a contract to you. You're just complaining that people won't offer a contract to you that you like, but you're clearly not in a position to be bargaining at all. So when you're in a position of weakness, you act like you're in a position of weakness, which means you accept the terms on a contract in good faith. Because you understand that if you do act in good faith, the person who is at the outset planning on like screwing you over or taking advantage of you, they may decide they actually kind of like you. Hey man, you've lived up to your end of the deal. Let's do another one. Let's make the terms better for you this time. Because now you've elevated in status as well. So you now maybe you could have a little more sway. You might be able to go get a better patron who's better enough that they can make up for the downside of them bailing on their existing patron. So you take the win when it's offered to you. Sometimes you have to score a touchdown. You don't have to win the game. You can't drive for the winning touchdown when you're down by 7 touchdowns. You have to get yourself down the field so that you can actually win the game. Interesting that there's a fractal relationship there too. There's a play-by-play evaluation relative to your position on the field. There's also a minute-by-minute evaluation relative to your position on the temporal field. And you can't over-index on one of these over the other. You have to be constantly balancing them both at the same time. So we're not in the position to demand better patrons. Shit, these are some pretty freaking good patrons. They just so happen to be seeming to follow the same cognitive trajectory on a several-year delay as most of us. Are they just doing this as a massive grand LARP to deceive all of us? They don't have to signal this stuff. They could take over the GOP and not signal any of this sort of thing whatsoever. They could go full gay and still effectively take over the GOP. Are you kidding me? Look how it is with them as it is. They have no reason to signal this sort of thing. But they are. For what? Like this little corner of the internet? Like that these are the people that need that like are it's this really weird, it's just a complete misevaluation of the terrain. Vastly overestimating our own influence and wildly underestimating the ratio of our influence to theirs. Yeah. We've got a lot of other stuff, so let's keep going. So here, yeah, this actually segues really nicely. I just realized I'm 40 minutes in. This was all just completely off the top of the head. This was not like, I didn't come in here thinking about saying all this. I was actually like, man, I need to kind of get through these kind of quick because I've got a whole bunch of stuff. So hopefully that was worthwhile. It says, it's looking like the two final vice president frontrunners were J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, with Vance representing the MAGA populist side, supported by Donald Trump Jr., and Marco Rubio, the runner-up, supported by the establishment-friendly camp in Trump world. Now let's watch this video, and then you're going to have to give me a moment for taking a victory lap, but here we go.
Completely in control of this moment, and I think he is right now. I think for a lot of Republicans, the choice of J.D. Vance, and you guys have said this, is to sort of reinvigorate, to make sure that MAGA mantle is passed on. And it's funny, you walk into this convention center, and when I walked in, the first thing you see is just red hats, red T-shirts, red jackets. It's all MAGA all the time. And I have new reporting. I understand there were deep conversations in the family. There was a split in the Trump family, right? There were members of the Trump family that were pushing hard for Senator Marco Rubio, and then there were members of the Trump family that were pushing hard for Senator J.D. Vance. We know that Don Jr. ultimately won that argument, which is interesting, and he went public with it. He essentially said, listen, Senator Marco Rubio is a very talented senator, but he's also the establishment. You know, he is not like us. He is not the MAGA movement, even though he has a close relationship with the Trump family. And ultimately, former President Trump listened to him. The interesting part is that even the First Lady, I understand, weighed in on this conversation, and you saw that the statement she put out there, she wanted to tone the rhetoric down. And I bring this up because the choice of J.D. Vance is interesting, because J.D. Vance does not tone it down. J.D. Vance was the first one out there who's attacking President Biden. He will be the bulldog. Yeah. Not that Donald Trump needs a bulldog, but he will be the bulldog in this scenario. And let me tell you something else. Don't be surprised if former President Trump sort of, I don't want to say sits back, but if he takes a step back, tries to be more measured, and he lets Senator Vance do all his dirty work.
All right, so I didn't bother to go back and pull up the past clips where I speculated that this is what was happening, but you can go listen to them. You can go back. I would encourage you, go give us as many views as you can. Go back and watch the old corpus of videos. Basically, just start at the beginning of the year. It's not that much. This is exactly what I speculated was happening. That there was a standoff. The reason why the VP thing wasn't being announced. Remember Trump said something really weird, like a while back that, I don't know, it was like 4 or 5 months ago, that they didn't know who the VP was going to be. And he was like, there's the person that I want, but I don't think it's going to be the person I want. And I think there's like a 25% chance that I'm going to get the person that I want, which is kind of a weird number. So it's like, okay, so you're telling me that there's 4 candidates right now. And of those 4 candidates, you have the one you want. And then there's 3 others who you presumably don't. But the influences around you are are pushing for them. So then there was speculation about, at what everyone was doing was speculating basically about who these candidates were. But it genuinely wasn't decided. It was undecided enough that after the assassination attempt, President Trump changed. Which makes me wonder, did he change in the sense of, no, this is the guy I've wanted all along, and I'm going with this guy? I kind of don't think so. I kind of don't think that JD Vance was the guy all along. I think he may have wanted RFK, or he may have wanted maybe Youngkin. I think he probably had one he wanted. And it seems that it was Marco Rubio was the one who it was going to be. And I am... that would have been so massively deflating. Which I also called. I said that the two options were either going to be someone that we really, really like or someone that's really, really deflating. And that's what it's going to come down to. It's going to be the establishment GOP trying to retain control over him, trying to give him another handler, or it's going to be outside interests winning over and providing their candidate. And the outside interests who won over were exactly the fucking guys I was looking at. The people who were the most outspoken about it were specifically the guys I was watching closest. David Sachs, Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson. They're the ones who openly came out and advocated for him immediately. He was their guy all along. This is extremely gratifying. I felt very, very speculative there for a long time. I had to really, really think about, like, am I really seeing this, or am I just kind of imagining all of these connections? And I'm Charlie from It's Always Sunny. So it's very, very gratifying. So thank you for indulging the victory lap. Josiah says, MAGA boomers love Rubio, at least the ones I talk to day to day. Sold on Vance when they expressed disappointment over it not being Rubio. Yeah, I could totally see that. Like Rubio is basically tailor-made to be the face of what was supposed to be the new GOP, which was really just a continuation of the existing GOP. What's going on, corkboard enjoyer?
Hello.
I did not think that said corkboard at first.
What did you think it said?
This is a family show, Cooper. You can't get me to say those sorts of things.
Well, you were just talking about Charlie, so I'm always sunny.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I couldn't think of anything off the cuff, so I rolled with it.
The art hoe kicked in, huh?
No, it was just hard to think of a name while I was listening to you in both of my ears at the same time.
This is a good point from Minoan. We haven't had a non-lifelong government employee ticket in over a century. Wow, that's a really interesting way to think about that. It would have been Jover with Rubio. Yeah. I actually forgot. The reason I'd had that video for you guys was for this comment from, I'd say sometimes friend of the show, Revenant. I think Revenant, he's like 90%, 80, 90, 90%. He's good. We've had to take issue with his stuff a few times, but in general, I like the stuff this guy tweets. He says the reality is you can have pro-Israel plus immigration restriction, or you can have pro-Israel plus immigration expansion. Those were the choices. Vance is clearly better than any of the other likely options. I don't like the neocon stuff either, but Trump proved himself on this. Now, this is one thing. So I'd actually forgotten he had the second half of the tweet here. What I was going to point out was this. Like, if you're blackpilling, after everything I was just talking about, if you're blackpilling over pro-Israel and that it's not immigration deletion, then this is an example of the autism. Like, this is bad autism. Many times, autism is good. We love autism. We are autism enjoyers. But that autism cannot become all-consuming.
To highlight a comment from my mortal enemy. I don't know if you already mentioned this when I was in between getting hooked up here, but back when you were talking about patronage a few minutes ago, Josiah said, Why fight for half of what they want when... I got to do some translating because his grammar is dog shit. Why fight for a half of what they want if they'd call it a betrayal if you got them 3/4?
Mm.
I hope that made sense to everyone else.
Yeah. Yes. That's...
Why would anyone want to be your patron or fight for you if, like, you know, even if they got you 75% of what you want, you still called them, you know, it wasn't good enough for you.
And on the flip side, why do they want to be your patron if them giving you 50% of what you want gets them treated the same way as you giving them, or them giving you 75% of what they want, like from everybody else? Them deviating from the mainstream is going to get them all of the hate and everything in the world, whether they do it like 2% or 50%. They're going to get the same response. So the fact that they're going to, I don't know, however you want to quantify it, it's somewhere very clearly that's much more than 2%, if it's not 50%. Why would they be offering that much if it wasn't because they're sincere? This isn't just some craven ploy to bait you back into the regime. No, it's not back into the regime. It's into the new regime. This is a regime change operation. Is that blunt enough? This is a regime change operation. It's going to be a new regime. That's what the vote is about. All right, and who does this sound like? Who's been talking about this sort of thing? Maybe a guy who is directly referenced as an influence by J.D. Vance himself. He openly admits that he is a Curtis Yarvin enjoyer. Yeah, he's friends with him. They've spent time together. And of course, the response to that is, Curtis Yarvin. Motherfucker, if I'd have told you 5 years ago that Curtis Yarvin was going to be influencing the Vice President of the United States directly, personally, you would have peed your pants.
Yeah, but Matt, he's a Jew.
Right. The reality is you can have pro-Israel plus immigration restriction or pro-Israel plus immigration expansion. Those are the options on the table. You don't have the social leverage to generate better than that. And this isn't what they're signaling. No, so obviously they're going to signal high and they're going to fall short of it. Whether it's because they don't have the will or there's so much opposition or whatever, they're going to fall short of it. So if they say we're going to deport 20 million people, they're probably going to deport 10 or 5. But like option 2 is none are deported. More are brought in. They say, oh, well, they're going to bring in the high value ones. Yeah, there's not going to be immigration deletion. This is the fucking United States of America. Like, literally the thing it's known for is being a place where a bunch of people immigrated there. And it wasn't that long ago. You're not going to get immigration deletion, no matter how much you want it. If there is to be an immigration deletion at some point, the only way you ever get that is by first getting immigration restriction and then building on that. Yes, incrementalism. Because the alternative is so much existentially worse. Is it a rigged game? Yes. Yes, that's the whole point. The guys, oh wow, this is a banger, Slosher. The guys who created PayPal and several other companies are offering you the chance to be an early investor in a regime startup. Ha! Slosher, if you're on, I think you're on Twitter. You need to tweet that and you need to tag me in it. That is, well, actually, it depends. There's a very good chance my reach has grown recently, which is a both a good thing and a bad thing. Many more idiots, and I get I have the dumbest enemies in the world. So, if you want me to bring those people at you, then you tweet it and tag me in it, and I'll retweet it. Otherwise, I'll tweet it. There's a
good point.
Go ahead.
Taylor Brown says, quoting Pete, "This is about taking 3 feet so the next generation can take a mile." Mm-hmm. I think that's right. Like, you want your big extropic moment, you got to kind of build out the infrastructure such that can actually happen.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes building that infrastructure is literal, given that the incoming regime wants to build a lot of infrastructure, which means if you're on their good side, there's going to be jobs available. You don't like the job market, it's going to get a lot better, but it's not going to get a lot better for everyone. $5 super chat from the man himself, P. Quinones. Thank you, sir. He says, when you figure out that pretty much every group out there purity spirals as much as libertarians. Yeah, it's like, and they purity spiral in the same way too. It's like libertarians are the essence of purity spiraling. So they're like where purity spiraling becomes purity spiraling. And then everything else is just like radiating out from there. Then we have a $10 super chat from Sergius. US, we're getting cold, hard American
Real
dollars.
money.
Real money. In the most recent Royal Path episode, they point to the spiritual manifestations you highlighted recently, but took a very cynical line that the QAnon boomers are going to manifest the Antichrist.
Matt, can I say something without you getting mad?
Remember, I haven't seen this episode. I've heard a lot of talk about it. I don't know who all is talking on there. Just remember who one of the hosts is.
I've also not seen this episode. I have I don't know the one guy. What's his name? Andrew, or whoever that guy is, the third guy. I don't know who he is. He's kind of funny. I have a lot of respect for Father Turbo. And even Cyprian. He said some really important things at some really important times in my life that were really salient and really put me really set me off on the right course. That said, this whole everything's Antichrist thing is getting real old.
Yes.
Everything's Antichrist. It's like this person's Antichrist. It's Elon Musk. It's Matthew McConaughey. It's Dave Smith. It's the Boomers. It's QAnon. Everything's Antichrist. I'm kind of getting tired of hearing that.
And we just posted, we played or I read the quote from St. Paisios, which it actually did my heart good to read that, because like if I'd have read that and he would have said, you should have no participation in the political sphere. Don't get involved. Focus on prayer and fasting.
Yeah, and this is
then I would have been. That's what I've been doing. You know? Yes,
this is a monk and a saint, a guy who probably didn't have a whole lot of involvement in the political sphere.
Right. But when I first came into Orthodoxy, we were in Southern California, and I was at the church we started going to was Father Josiah Trenum's church. And when we were trying to decide whether or not we were going to move, we wanted to stay there. We wanted to begin our catechism there, but we also were feeling the pull to move. So we went to him and talked to him for an hour and a half, something like that, to get some counsel. Sat there right in the office where he does his podcast. He just turns to the side, and we sat there and talked. And it was a very moving experience. That is a holy man. Like, I know I've been in the presence of a holy man. I know it because I could see it when I was talking to Father Josiah. And one of the things that he made very clear to us, because I told him about like the podcast that I was doing, and like, I'm starting to get into this orthodoxy stuff, but I don't know how much I really want to talk about it publicly as I'm going through all this. And he encouraged me to keep doing it. He didn't know anything about it. I just described to him the sort of content, and he encouraged me to keep doing it. He said, you feeling this pull to do this and people reacting to it the way they are is an indicator you need to keep doing it. And he said that he encourages all of his parishioners to be active politically. This is a Christian responsibility, to be active and outspoken politically in your community, and to be constantly working for the betterment of your community, being willing to sacrifice for it, being willing to speak out when it's not pleasant to do it, advocating for the people who are being harmed. He says, I encourage my my parishioners to get elected to local office, to go patronize your elected officials and take them out to lunch and talk to them and have an influence on them. Because this is part of being a holistic Christian. That made a really profound impact on me. So between that and seeing what St. Paisios said, I cannot sanction this libertarian perspective toward government.
No.
Toward politics.
I don't know that it. Okay, I'm not one of these guys who's going to get like ultra rigorous about like the really, I don't know, internecine debates about like theology and what is the. I hate when people do like this is the orthodox position on this and this is the orthodox position on that. I get really, really tired of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because all I have found in all of my study, given it's, you know, I'm no scholar or anything like that, but I've read a lot, and most of what I see in like the patristics and church history is a whole lot of arguing. So,
yeah,
the idea, like, I don't know, especially when it comes to government, I'll just say that I don't think libertarianism is it, man.
Mm-mm.
Having prefaced with everything I just said, and I know that I'm just doing the thing that I just said I hate doing, but when people like I just don't think I can't see how libertarianism and traditional Christianity line up at all.
Mm-hmm.
No, you have a duty to like stop evil by force if you have to.
Mm-hmm. Self-defense is not an individual activity.
Right.
Like, it's a collective exercise. And there are times when you as an individual need to engage in self-defense for more than just yourself. Because there is nothing Christian about egalitarianism. And that's egalitarianism latent in there. Like nobody would say that you'd be very hard pressed to find, I mean, within anybody who's going to be hearing this or anybody who anyone knows who's hearing this, like, to find a Christian who would be openly advocating for communism, revolutionary communism. So there are clearly certain types of governmental systems that you should not advocate for.
Yeah, right.
So then taking a libertarian approach to politics and government is a political system that you're advocating for. You're saying, well, it's a political system that's not a political system, but it's still a political system. So you're still advocating that people occupy a particular relationship. You're prescribing a particular relationship for people with respect to their neighbors. So that, like, it's a complete non-starter to say that, like, not participating in the political system whatsoever is a prescribed position for Christians. Which then means when you deal in the political system, you need to deal in the political system with discipline and circumspection, and you need to be good at it.
Yeah.
You need to become an expert in it if you're going to participate in it. You need to be educated. This is part of being a gentleman, an aristocrat, an upstanding member of society, a good citizen. These are Christian obligations. And if these are Christian obligations, then I can't reconcile how this could be a Christian obligation and also you just say, oh, all the sides are bad and this whole system doesn't represent me, so therefore I'm just going to cede control of it and let it steamroll everyone I love.
Right, like you're just gonna let the homeless junkie crash on the slide at the kid's playground or something
Right.
like that because he's not hurting anybody.
Yeah.
This obviously is gonna rot your entire neighborhood if you let this kind of behavior continue.
And if there are people who are trying to import that into your neighborhood, you have an active responsibility to stop that from happening. In some sense. Clearly, there's good ways of doing that and bad ways of doing that.
Yeah, and not every way has to involve force and certainly not violence, but Sometimes it does
Yes.
require that. And you have to do that.
Yes. Okay. Catholic Orthodoxy, Andrew says, gives the church mega credibility when you do good on its behalf, cleaning up the crooks that are oppressing people unopposed. Yes, like, what sort of if Christians, like right now in the West, Christianity has this reputation for being ignorant and backward and regressive, and it's not positively associated with people who are respected. And I'm reminded of that when we did the reading of J.D. Vance's piece the other night, which you guys should go watch if you haven't yet. Him describing his conversion to Christianity and how that went about. Just gets into his background and everything. Very, very good. But what was I going to say? His quote from St. Augustine, where St. Augustine talked about, like, if you're a Christian, you shouldn't just be, like, shooting the mouth off saying stupid stuff. Like, don't make yourself publicly a fool. Because making yourself publicly a fool makes people associate Christianity with people who are foolish. Now, as with many things, this is a both and thing. The vast majority of people should not act a fool publicly as a Christian. And then the exception is the exception because it's the exception. The fools for Christ. Because if everybody doesn't, then you kind of lose the category of fool for Christ. Because if everyone's being a fool, nobody is. So the way to maintain that category is by not being a fool for Christ.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see. I wanted to touch on, real quick, because we talked about this before, John Deere. So we talked about Robbie Starbuck exposing John Deere, which we very much endorse. See, this is the corporate version of what was happening with Libs of TikTok at the individual level. It's happening at both levels. John Deere just issued this statement in response to me exposing them. They say that going forward, they commit to no longer funding pride parades. Business resource groups will no longer be divided on identity lines. They will audit all training materials to ensure the absence of socially motivated messages. I don't even know what that means. Like, this is like, I don't even think I would necessarily want them to have no socially motivated messages. Like, I don't want the companies that rule over my society to be socially neutral.
I guess that'd be better than, like, explicitly evil.
Yes, yeah, definitely. But it's kind of a weird takeaway.
So, in other words, corporate training videos are going to get even more boring than they already are.
Right, yeah. And then they said no hiring quotas or pronoun usage. Another huge win in our war on wokeness, but I don't think this is enough for customers to go back. Customers want to hear that DEI policies are entirely gone and that they will no longer participate in social credit CEI scoring by HRC. This half measure shows that we're a powerful force to be reckoned with, though. While I'm not completely pleased, I don't want to downplay the fact that this is another massive win. All of you are helping me force corporate America back to sanity. I won't rest until we eliminate leftism from corporate America. So, shout out to Robbie Starbuck. I think that his job is going to start getting a lot easier. In fact, he may be out of a job soon. Because the way that public sentiment is turning, I don't think it's turned, but the way it's turning, companies are going to start doing this on their own, which is a good thing. So here's another. I'm going to get some kind of rapid fire ones here for a little bit, and then I've got some pieces to read. Rachel Maddow claims Lord of the Rings is a favorite for far-right figures. So this is the way that the regime is reacting to J.D. Vance, who is ostensibly the deep regime Manchurian candidate. Lord of the Rings. Actually, I'll just play the whole video.
Like Mr. Teal, who has named his companies after things in the Lord of the Rings series of J.R.R. Tolkien books. Lord of the Rings is a sort of favorite cosmos for naming things and cultural references for a lot of far-right and alt-right figures, both in Europe and the United States. Peter Thiel names all these things after Tolkien figures and places, like his company Palantir, for example. Like his mentor, like Peter Thiel, who had given him all his jobs in the world, Mr. Vance also, when he founded his own venture capital firm with help from Peter Thiel, named it after a Lord of the Rings thing. He called it Narya, N-A-R-Y-A, which you can remember because it's Aryan, but you move the N to the front. Apparently that word has something to do with elves and rings from the Lord of the Rings series. I don't know.
Oh, that guy is so dumb, man. Narya. That's where the name came from. It's an anagram of Aryan. That's why J.R.R. Tolkien wrote it that way. For those who don't know, Narya was here's the Lord of the Rings nerdery. Narya was one of the 3 rings that was given to the elves. So you had the one ring. I think there's a document there. Yeah. So you have the one ring at the top. You had the 3 rings given to the elves, the 7 to the dwarves, and the 9 to men. And the Narya was the fire ring. It was the gem, and it was a ruby. Now this is interesting. So the name that J.D. Vance chose for his company is Narya, and it gave its wielder resistance to the weariness of time, and evoked hope and courage in others. Isn't that interesting? So obviously, in them, the names that they use are meaningful. Them drawing from Lord of the Rings. You can read into them, like Palantir, for example. The Palantir were the seeing stones. They were like gigantic, really smooth orbs, and they were like a remote viewing thing, essentially. Which I had this thought the other day: Palantir and the orb and remote viewing. And the conversation with Stormy Waters and Space Age Maximalist, where he talks about the original CIA experiments with remote viewing, which were conducted by Rupert Sheldrake, the morphogenetics guy. That's a very interesting connection there. Wonder what it is that Palantir does. Is it a software company?
Something
I don't know.
like that.
Yeah. Anyways.
So I've been told.
So obviously Palantir is there's significance in the name associated with the organization. Palantir has more of an evil connotation, though. No, or was it only evil because Sauron had one? It's not evil per se. I can't remember all the mythology of Palantir. I read the Silmarillion like 5 times when I was like 12, and so I remember bits and pieces of it. But I need to go. It's on my list to go back and reread. But as I remember, the Palantir was not evil per se. It was it became a portal for evil. What were we just talking about? Oh, so then some of the other names, you have Mithril, which is the male, the elven chainmail, and then the one that Frodo was wearing. Well, I guess I won't give you guys any spoilers. If
come on, dude, spoilers! It's only been like 90 years or whatever.
If you haven't seen it in the last 25 years, I'll save you from spoiling it. And then the other one would be Palmer Lucky's company is Anduril, which was, if I'm remembering right, Anduril was Aragorn's sword. Okay, Slosher said he was joking. Yeah. So Narya, it's very interesting that it's what was it? Time weariness. It shields its wearer from time weariness and promotes hope and courage in others. Very, very interesting. Here's some more shitlib travails. You guys have heard of coping. If you've been on the internet, you know what coping is. We are about to see some epic, legendary coping.
Here's the question that I have on that. These 2 men are both elderly. Donald Trump is an elderly man who, for whatever reason, was given 9
Look at
seconds
him.
to take a iconic photo op during an active shooter situation.
Did you hear what she said?
Given 9 seconds to take. Donald Trump is an elderly man who, for whatever reason, was given 9 seconds to take a iconic photo op during an active shooter situation. Weird
For whatever reason, he was given
For
9
whatever reason.
seconds.
situation. We'll figure that out one day. But his survival of that and bouncing right back and going right to his convention is being conveyed in the media world as a sign of strength. This current president of the United States is 81 years old and has COVID. Should he be fine in a couple of days, doesn't that convey exactly the same thing? That he's strong enough, older than Trump, to have gotten something that used to really be fatal to people his age. So if he does fine out of it and comes back and is able to do rallies, isn't that exactly the same?
It should.
I mean, it's not exactly the same. It's not the same incident, but it's an elderly man coming through out of an illness.
It should.
Exactly the
Now, I really want to know what she was about to say, because where was it? They showed the close-up of her face, and it was, yes, here. I get the sense that she is smart. She is not. She is better than these people that she's with. She's very clever. Yeah. Jen Psaki can't believe what she's hearing. She's like, yeah, you just said that on live TV. Oh my God. Who the fuck am I on this panel with?
I do remember listening to this entire clip earlier today, and I do believe that she, if I recall correctly, that she like basically just agrees. Like, oh yeah, you're totally right. She just goes and plays along with it.
Like what would you do otherwise? Like, how do you respond to that?
No, you're stupid.
Well, yes, obviously, but like,
You're stupid, a very mediocre person. You're obviously a DEI hire, and you shouldn't be here. And you're black. Why is the camera all freaked out?
Jared Cole's real estate says, can I say something about Jen Psaki without everyone getting mad? I'll allow it. I'll allow it. Yes. There was something up here. Who said it? Magoo said, this is just please clap in black. Joy Reid has to go back. Okay, so there's a interesting piece here that dropped 2 days ago in the Washington Examiner. This is the absolute state of the libs. A bombshell revelation flew under the radar last week, and now it cannot be ignored, by Elizabeth Stouffer. Something about a woman being named after like meatloaf, or not? What is not meatloaf? But what am I thinking of? What's the
Stouffer?
Stouffer's?
Is that like is that kind of like Hamburger Helper or something? Like
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Pre-made ready mix dinner thing.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what
I don't remember.
Yeah. Anyways, women kitchen joke completely flopped. New York Times columnist Ezra Klein revealed last week that top Democrats had privately admitted to him that former President Donald Trump is not actually a threat to democracy. Considering this narrative has been the centerpiece of the Democrats' 9-year gaslighting campaign against Trump, this bombshell revelation should have been shouted from the rooftops. Regarding his off-the-record discussions with Democratic lawmakers who are currently deciding whether to back President Joe Biden or abandon him after his disastrous debate performance, Klein said, I've had top Democrats say something like, I don't know why all these Democrats who think Donald Trump is an existential threat to democracy are acting the way they are. But the reason I'm acting the way I am is because I don't think that. So there's a split within the leadership of the Democratic Party.
Dude.
Where one of them says, you guys have been saying he's an existential threat to democracy. So why are you compromising the unity of the party right now? Why are you guys no longer being useful idiots? I don't believe he's an existential threat to democracy, but when you believe it, you do what I want you to. So this is the patron class of the Democrats who are getting ready to abandon their clients.
Dude, it's really interesting to watch, like a social contagion, a madness of sorts, kind of like start to, like people are kind of like falling out of the haze. You know, they've been possessed for how many years now, and watching them like come out of the, snap out of it. And some of them are aware that they're snapping out of it. I don't know, maybe they were just like bad faith actors the whole time. But it seems like there's some people who are aware that like they licked their finger and stuck it in the air and they saw the way the wind's blowing and they're trying to get out ahead of it, and they're trying to like smooth over this transition, knowing that a week ago they were just saying a bunch of this wild shit and now they're not allowed to say that anymore, and they're like, oh, I never believed that, and they're trying to like okay,
right. Mellon says elites versus true believers.
Yeah
basically. Yep. Continuing, he's quoting them. He says, and they say, it would be quite unpleasant for me, the lawmakers, personally, to come out against the president as an elected official in the Democratic Party. Close quote. And weighing what will happen if Donald Trump wins and saying in a revealed preference way, I can live with Donald Trump winning. So this is elected Democrats. Elected Democrats are saying, I can live with Trump winning. Yeah. We've had our whole thing. At this point, like, I can read the political winds. I have my own election to be concerned about later on. Like, I need to make sure that I'm not getting too departed from my constituents. And we're reaching the point where even my constituents are going to bail on me. So we need to focus on the down ballot stuff. We can live with whatever takeover they're going to do, whatever their things are. We need to retrench and we need to try to control our prime territory. He said, and I've heard people say that to me off the record, to be fair. So he's kind of, there was a huge fucking, like Tim Miller freaks the fuck out. There's a huge shit fit about this because he's breaking the rules. He's leaking stuff that he should not be leaking. But probably the reason he's doing it is because he understands that him doing that would actually kind of be in their interest. So they're fine with it. They just want to be as far removed from it as possible.
Right.
These are extremely insecure people right now. The Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller, clearly shaken by Klein's remarks, demanded that he out his sources. You have a calm voice, but you're skyrocketing my fucking blood pressure right now, Miller said. Ezra, I'm just like so fucking mad.
Like.
Agreeing with his comrade, Klein said, I find it maddening, but I do find it consistent. Tim Miller says, if you want to hear a blood-boiling perspective on the hypocrisy and cynicism of Democratic elites in the face of the looming Trump threat from someone who speaks in soothing, dulcet tones, do I have the podcast for you? Here's the galling exchange with Ezra Klein about his conversations with top Democrats who were resigned to Trump. Now, get this. Look at the date. This was before the assassination attempt. This was in the fallout of the debate. This is not in the fallout of the assassination attempt. Miller's indignation was representative of the large and growing number of Democrats for whom progressivism has become a religion, one based on the group's shared belief that Trump poses an existential threat to democracy. Some, such as Miller, firmly believe it. But, as Klein revealed, others pay mere lip service to it out of loyalty to the party. This means that rather than calling out party leaders for implementing their vile Soviet-style character assassination agenda against Trump, they've become willing participants, or useful idiots, in a massive fraud. The truth is that the Democrats' gaslighting campaign was born of their very real fear that a Trump presidency would pose a threat to their hold on power. In 2016, Trump ran on disrupting Washington and revitalizing what had become a bloated, ineffectual government that had long ago stopped working with the public who was supposed to be there. Yeah, okay. So, what's interesting is number one, if you're Ezra Klein is like an Obama insider. Yeah. This is like Beltway Democrats, which are closely aligned with Wall Street Democrats, with NGO Democrats. This is elite Democrats. And what we're seeing is that all of this rhetoric is exactly as it appeared. It was simply rhetoric that they opportunistically capitalized on and borrowed from the AOC wing of the progressives. From the actual radical, the original SJWs, the that super progressive wing, which skews very young, they're the ones who are the most deranged, the most radical. And the establishment Democrats just kind of pulled them into their wing and echoed their rhetoric because of the utility it gave them in going to war with Donald Trump on separate grounds.
So when Donald Trump wins the presidency again, do you think the squad will return for a second season?
I don't know. See, this is very interesting because
I was saying that kind of jokingly, but
well, yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I think taking it seriously, I think this is one thing that's very interesting about JD Vance. Actually, I'll save that. I'll save that for I just shat all over your joke. I'm sorry. I'll save that for later because we're gonna read something about JD Vance. Here's a funny video. What?
Did you watch his speech?
I did. Did you?
I did.
What'd you think?
It's, with the exception of Trump, because Trump's kind of his own thing. But listening to JD Vance's speech, it's probably the first time I've actually ever heard a politician speak and it not sound like a politician giving a speech.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Where, like, you listen to a politician's speech and you know they're full of shit and you know they're trying to con you. And it seemed, and maybe I'm biased, I don't know. It seemed sincere. Or he's a really good actor, I don't know, but it seemed sincere. He didn't do the normal, like, he didn't have the normal, like, politician-y inflection and doing all the sales tricks and working their fucking word magic on you.
He didn't sound like Mike Pence.
Yeah.
Yeah. My takeaway from it was kind of boring. I thought it was so there was a couple moments that I thought on like a personal level that I thought were really good. Like his moment with his mom was a powerful moment. And then the anecdotes, like everything about his mom, whoever, like having his mom be front and center with that and his anecdotes about her and everything were just masterful. They were so
brilliant.
Good. So good. And he pulled it off really sincerely because you can tell that it's sincere.
It's kind of like, you know how like Barack Obama put out like his autobiography or something like that as he was running or whatever, so that, you know, and he put all the bad shit in there, or at least he put some of the bad shit in there already to kind of inoculate him from like scandal once he was running, which was a really smart move.
Yeah.
Between Hillbilly Elegy and then him talking about that kind of stuff during the speech, I'm like, oh, this is really smart.
Yeah.
All of the embarrassing stuff, he's already kind of, you know, it's already out there, so you can't really get him.
And he's turning it into a strength. Like,
yeah, right.
Like, not only can you not get me on this, but I'm going to capitalize on it.
And I will. There were a number of moments in the speech that did kind of get me a couple of times, because like hearing him describe, I don't know, talking about the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
Like he it's clear that he knows what he's talking about and he's actually experienced these things, because he's describing my world, though, in the world I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
Blue collar guys, you know, opioid addiction. Like I didn't graduate that long ago from high school, and at least 6 or 7 people that I went to school with are dead from heroin and fentanyl.
Mm-hmm.
Several of them I was close to. It's just everywhere. People are barely able to afford living, you know, and you get these guys who, it's like, okay, so they're working maybe for an auto manufacturer in Michigan or something like that, and they have a decent job, and then those jobs get shipped overseas, and what's left is like the shitty jobs at like whatever reserve plant they have here, and so their wages get slashed in half, and, you know, half of it's even then half of it's going to the union that's screwing them over, and they don't have any money, and their kids are addicted to drugs or like transing themselves or whatever. And yeah, and they're just good people, you know? But all of these towns, because I grew up in these towns, are just covered in rust. And there's something about it that's kind of, it's kind of nostalgic, but nostalgia is not exactly the right word because I wasn't there in the heyday, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But just like growing up and seeing like, you can still see the outlines and the shadows of, you know, what used to be a great town or what used to be a great city, where there used to be prosperity and promise and potential and energy. And now it's like half of the buildings are just covered in blight and rotting and falling away. Everyone's got needles in their arms or they're alcoholics. Nobody has any money. What little money they do have is like so they can buy ramen and maybe a pack of smokes or something, so they get a little bit of enjoyment out of their life. And they're just hardworking people. And they want to have a good life, and it's just not going to happen. And it's like hearing somebody, and then, you know, and then you hear like the fucking libs who my whole life have been telling me in the most patronizing tones that they're for the working man. They're for the little guy. That's what they do. They stand up to big business. And then as soon as like they're not talking to you, they talk to their friends about you and with like the most disdain and dripping contempt. I know this because I have a lot of shit lib friends that don't know that I'm like, these are my people. And this is where I grew up. And I hear how they talk to each other about me and my people. And it's like, and then you people are saying that you're for my people. But you hate my people. And then to hear a guy who, it's very clear to me, actually did grow up, you know, as one of my people, Midwesterner, Rust Belt, heroin. Yeah, it seemed clear. It seemed to me that he was sincere.
The libs attitude to Appalachia, the Midwest, is like Jim Goad said. Like they took it's very I don't know, like post Civil War, you know, Northeastern American telling a black guy, oh, you know, we fought the war to free the slaves. We fought you're indebted to us. We freed you. But then they're like, but we don't want you in our house. Like don't you go live in the ghetto. Don't live around us. You go have your space, but you're indebted to us. We freed you. There's a very similar dynamic there, where it's like, oh, we're the ones who represent you. You're liberal. You're liberal. See, we're liberal. This is what liberal means. You're liberal. This is what it means to be liberal. See, the experts said so. You listen to the experts, right? Because you know you're a fucking idiot. You know you're a rube. Mm-hmm. You're a dumb person. You didn't even go to college. So you listen to the experts who actually went to college, and they tell you what liberal means. You want to be a good liberal, don't you? Because if you're not a good liberal, you know what happens. The people who aren't liberals, they get shot. So you're a good liberal, right? You're going to be a good liberal? You're going to vote for us? That's been the relationship of the Democrats to them. So someone like, it blows my mind thinking about if I haven't really bought into the idea that Peter Thiel has been grooming JD Vance for the presidency for, I don't know, since 2011 or whatever when they met. Or even, what was it, 2014 that the book was published? Was that when it was? Somewhere in there? Like, but if he was, my God, think about what that would imply about Peter Thiel's understanding of the social dynamics at play here, and recognizing the potential in JD Vance as a future president because of the way that he would appeal to the white working class and the way that he appeals to them.
Yeah, you know, I have to admit, like okay, I generally, as I've said before, don't vote. Not really. I enjoy the memes. I enjoy the circuits, but I'm not particularly involved emotionally or invested in like the political happenings of the day or whatever. And maybe it is because he's just working, you know, politician voodoo word magic on me or something. But like, actually, it was actually a really surreal experience because I was listening to it on my way home from work today. Hearing him, it was just hearing a politician actually, at least, if you want to be cynical, pretending, but in any case, giving lip service and sounding sincere and describing my life and my experience, and actually like talking about that publicly was a really surreal experience. And there's kind of this really, like, I'm hesitant. It kind of hit me in the chest, you know? Like there's this thing inside of me that's like, I don't know, just putting my cards on the table. Like, it made me hopeful. And then there's a part of me that's also jaded and be like, no, these people are full of shit. Don't get hopeful because they're going to let you down. And then you can just like dust your hands. See, it was, knew this was going to happen. But then I've been thinking a lot about this recently. Like, don't blackpill. You know, it's good to be hopeful. And it's just really weird to actually feel like, oh, I feel like I have a little bit of buy-in into the American political process in a way that I never have before and I've never cared about. And perhaps this is me just getting, hypnotized by the rising Antichrist or whatever. But I don't know, man.
Shout out to Sean Whelan in the chat. Good to see you, buddy.
I had a good friend just a couple months ago. Very good friend of mine die of a heroin overdose. He had 2 kids that were less than 3 years old. You know?
Josiah
It'd be
says,
nice if we could fix that. You know?
I'd imagine if there were some patrons who were like, hey, we're interested in solving this problem. Because this problem for you, it's a problem for us as well. Like the nature of the problem for us may be different than the nature of the problem for you, but we recognize that it's a problem. And we recognize that we have a responsibility to fix it.
Okay, Taylor, don't get gay on me in the chat. Okay, stop writing poetry or whatever. Oh, okay, you're quoting C.S. Lewis. I guess that's fine. I'll allow it. I let my guard down for 1 minute and everyone starts getting gay. Stop that. What you're supposed to do is call me a faggot. So yeah, you're right. You need to harden back up.
Yeah,
man here.
Fucking faggot.
Yeah, that's right.
I missed this back here. $9.99 super chat. Some more real money, cold hard American cash from Colin from Cursed World Call. He says, Matt cannot miss. Join the Discord, life-changing group, unmatched community. Now that is an endorsement. Kingpill.com. Go join. I wanted to highlight something that Josiah said here. He said, all true points, but I'd imagine if his trajectory was politically mapped, he'd be a high church prot of some fashion. That's a good point. Yeah. So that leads me back to the notion that I don't think that this is a I find myself on one hand, the people who are like, Peter Thiel is an evil mastermind. And I'm like, no, he's just a mastermind. But then on the flip side, they're like, he's been planning this for his entire life. And I'm like, no, like, he's also not superhuman. He's also like a human being. But I'd imagine being himself and being aware of these things for as long as he has, he's been in the business of recruiting potential presidential candidates for a while. And I'm sure that's what Blake Masters was. Blake Masters would be doing the exact same thing that J.D. Vance is if Blake Masters had been elected. So in a sense, J.D. Vance is the backup plan. And that may be a backup plan just in terms of time, and it may be a backup plan in terms of priority. I don't know. Okay.
Or maybe the Blake Masters thing was a misdirection so he could sneak Vance in the back door.
Yeah. There's a joke just waiting to be made there, but the man is winning right now, so
gay.
Out of respect. Okay, quick funny thing.
Peter Thiel, that is.
I want to really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
So this was the Ugandan news broadcast. They broadcast on a little bit of a delay, and the signal kind of breaks down as you get to Uganda. But I thought that was the rest of the world really is just kind of like America's client states. Even in Uganda, they're reliving American history. Now, speaking of that event, I wanted to highlight this a few days ago and forgot to. Logan Hall, Powerful Mutual, says Trump's instincts here were amazing. This is from the Washington Examiner. Trump said when he stood up and saw the crowd had not moved, he needed to tell them that he and the country were going to be okay. Quoting, "The energy coming from the people there in that moment, they just stood there. It's hard to describe what that felt like, but I knew the world was looking. I knew that history would judge this, and I knew I had to let them know we are okay." That quote's hard to read out loud. And if you're cynical about this sort of thing, I pity you. Because these are historical moments. Historic moments. I just made myself angry. These are historic moments. This is the sort of thing that people try to write mythologies about. They could only hope to write a mythology as good as this. And
yeah, as Tucker said, I don't know if you saw the speech that Tucker gave a couple days ago. I think it was like the day after, or maybe even the day of, over at Heritage. He gave a speech shortly after the assassination. He's like, Trump just won the election, basically. He's like, he was just tested. That was the ultimate test, and he passed.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Here you go. Grandpa Trump, if you only knew how good things are going to be. I'm very curious. I'm bummed out that I'm not going to be able to listen to his speech tonight. I'll have to rewatch it later on. But I'm very much looking forward to it. And I think so. Here was one of the thoughts I had about about JD Vance's speech. So I thought it was a little bit. It was a little boring. Like the content of it was kind of a little boring. Like it was good content, but it was. It wasn't. He wasn't like Vivek. He wasn't like really barnstorming. And when I did, I talked to Jason at the 2-Bit Podcast with Thomas777 and Dimes and P. Quinones. We were kind of speculating about what their relationship was going to be. In that video clip I played a little bit ago, he mentioned the same thing, where there's kind of the expectation here that Vance is going to be the bulldog, and basically Vance is bad cop and Trump is good cop. I definitely think Trump as good cop is what's coming. I think we're going to see an incredibly magnanimous, gracious, unity message from Trump in vibe, in what he gives off and his rhetoric and everything. I don't think policies are going to change.
What unity means is that you get on board with me.
Yes, exactly. It's going to be, I've been given the mandate from heaven, and I am happy to accept anyone on board who recognizes that mandate. Now, what I think we were a little wrong with Vance in terms of rhetoric. And I think this is a good thing. I've been thinking about how I feel about this, and I think for now, I think it's a good thing. Vance came off the same way. Very magnanimous. Very gracious, very open arms, very lighthearted. Great vibe with the crowd. They're feeling it. Someone tweeted at me and pointed out that Trump has primed the voter base for having a personal back and forth with him while he's speaking. So now when Vance comes up there, everybody wants to interact with him. They're shouting to him, going back and forth, and he's getting into it. And they started this like kind of a meme went through where they would just chant something every so often. Whatever thing he was talking about, they'd pick it and they'd chant it. And so it was like, you're looking in, these people are having a grand old time. This is Trump's base, like the MAGA boomers, the white working class people. This is their culture. This is them there having a grand old time. They're at a conference, at a festival, whatever. They're just barnstorming and
yeah, it's like karaoke night at the VFW.
Yeah, exactly. That's totally the dynamic and the vibe that they're having there. Which, for anybody who's watching that, the curious people who are tuning in, that's going to be very attractive to them. So I think that rhetorically, at least until the election, Vance is going to be just as magnanimous as Trump. I think they're just going to be united on that. They're not going to present like a dialectic or anything within themselves. But I think that Vance's job ultimately is going to be a bulldog behind the scenes, which is interesting. Is some of the stuff we'll get into here in a little bit about the amount of work that he's already done across the aisle as a senator could actually really come in handy, as many of these Democrats are kind of like, all right, well, we're just going to have to get on board. If we want to maintain any sort of political footprint around here, we're going to have to become the compromise party. So he could become a real asset that way. And I think that's where he's going to serve as a bulldog, or at least that's the intent.
Slosher says, I read Vance's book years ago. I've been trying to tell my family disappointed with him as VP that Vance is more MAGA than Trump. You know, and I was thinking about that. There is a sense in which that's true, because as much as like the MAGA crowd loves Trump, I think maybe in the back of their head there is this recognition that, like, okay, this guy, he's a billionaire. He's always been one. He was born into it, and that's him. He's always been there. And yeah, we love him, and he loves us. And we're happy to follow him. But there is something about JD Vance where it's like, oh, JD Vance actually, it was one of us.
Mm-hmm. Which is very American in itself. That's American mythology.
Yeah.
Like the country boy who goes and makes it big in the city and then comes back home and saves
so
his
is
family.
And so is the over the top billionaire who's just rolling around in gold. So it's like you've got both sides of like American exceptionalism or whatever.
Yeah, very much so. It's the American exceptionalism ticket.
Yeah.
Josiah says Vance is good enough that he's either our guy or we can just throw in the towel because they've got our fucking number. Yeah, right. Little news thing here. A little more I told you so's. Nancy Cook here. This is, we went to Mar-a-Lago in late June to talk to former President Trump about taxes, tariffs, the Federal Reserve, pardons, Taiwan, and who could be Treasury Secretary. Have at it. We're not going to go through the whole thing. I'll drop the link to this tweet if you guys want to go and read the article yourself. Drop that in the chat. But the highlights from it: Trump said he would allow Powell to finish his term as Fed chair if reelected, which is very interesting because there was a notorious battle between Jerome Powell and Trump was not happy with Jerome Powell because he wanted lower interest rates to make him look better, and he wasn't getting them. Well, he has changed his tune. It seems that someone has made the case to him of why interest rates must remain high, given what it's doing to Europe. So Powell staying in place is very interesting. There's a change in tune, and it's a change in tune in the Tom Luongo, Phil Gibson direction. They have been, and Stormy Waters was talking about this as well. They've been vindicated. No more TikTok ban. That's interesting. I was told that this TikTok ban was something that was being driven by Israeli interests, and the cover story for it was China. Well, no more TikTok ban. That's very interesting. Cool to the idea of the U.S. protecting Taiwan. Now this is another change. People are talking about this. I was going to say this earlier, the neocon thing. I'm seeing these people who are saying that JD Vance is a neocon, Trump is a neocon, and it's making my fucking corneas bleed. Like, is willing to use the military does not mean neocon. Like, believes that the American military has a role in different things abroad does not mean neocon. This is like low resolution NPCs just regurgitating. Their talking heads have told them war equals neocon, military use equals neocon. So like now it's like, oh, the military should not be doing anything whatsoever anywhere at any time. And this is like, I'm not saying that I'm going to agree with or endorse every single use of the military. But the thing that they are signaling very clearly, very strongly, is a continuation of the Trump policy that if there are going to be military engagements, they're going to be direct, they're going to be brutal, they're going to be surgical, and we're going to get out. Which is how the military ought to operate. So what we have right now is the military operating how it shouldn't in places that it shouldn't. What they're signaling is the military will operate as it should in fewer places that it shouldn't. Which is a continuation of the first Trump policy, and JD Vance is aligned on that.
There was also, did you notice the comment from JD Vance where he said, our allies will be responsible for policing. Well, I don't remember how he phrased it, but basically that America, he seemed to imply that he doesn't want America doing the world police, like securing international trade thing anymore. Everyone else is going to be responsible for doing that too, and they're not going to just like get a free ride.
Mm-hmm. It was something that something Trump has said also. I think maybe even said specifically about Taiwan, that Taiwan has been made very wealthy off the backs of Americans, and so he's like, you guys need to start taking care of your own defense. Be responsible for your own issues. If you don't want to be part of China, then provide for your own defense. You're more than capable of doing it. It's not our job to defend you. The same relationship toward NATO
and Israel.
And Israel, yes. And even if it doesn't end up being that way toward Israel, having it stop being that way everywhere else is better than having it be that way with Israel and everywhere else.
Right. You know, what was interesting is I remember, well, just the other day when J.D. Vance was announced as the nominee, it was, I think Ben Shapiro was ecstatic that J.D. Vance was to pick because, I don't know, AIPAC or Israel Connections or something like that. And all of the doomers...
Go ahead.
All of the doomers
I've got a Ben Shapiro
out.
clip in a bit.
Oh, do you? All the doomers were freaking out, like, "Oh, see, it's over, man, it's over." And here we are, like a day and a half later, and Ben Shapiro's like, "I don't know." After this speech, he's like, "I don't like what JD Vance is saying."
Yeah,
like,
right.
That seems to. I like that trajectory.
Okay, yeah, that's actually the next one here. So the last point I'll make real quick. Magoo said how quickly people forget what neocon means and how they move. It wasn't that long ago, for fuck's sake.
I know, dude.
Because, like, neocon is not just use the military. Neocon is an entire cabal of interests. And J.D. Vance is an absolute needle in the eye to every single other one of their interests. And he's not even aligned with them on the military stuff.
Yeah, like... Basically, they're establishment Republicans. Like, those are like the hangers-on of the neocons.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And notice that, like, virtually all of their leadership has been ejected.
Yeah.
There's still some tokens that are hanging on, and
Yep.
And people are not cluing in. They're just like, oh, the GOP's gay. It's always been gay. It's new people doing the same gay stuff, by and large. But those people who are doing that gay stuff are doing it because they recognize they are the mainstream party. And their responsibility at the RNC is get the Republican elected, which means get anybody to vote for the Republican. The political system is never going to be the church. That's why there is a church. The political system needs to be affected by the church. Ideally, it will work in lockstep with the church, but you're not going to get there overnight. So yes, there's going to be things about it that are bad and they suck and they're gross and they shouldn't be endorsed, but there's also a reason for them. And you can recognize that reason and you can not like what's happening and you could say, I don't like that. I wish you would stop doing that. While also recognizing what's happening. Last point was he'd consider Jamie Dimon as Treasury Secretary. Huh. Where else have we heard this? Jamie Dimon, the name just keeps coming up.
Yep.
Josiah says Trump was fighting for MAGA, then Powell was fighting to MAGA. That's a really good way of putting it. That's a very Josiah way of putting it. Cooler heads have prevailed. Of course, lots has happened in the past 4 years. Indeed. Okay, so done with this. On to the next. Got several more things here. First of all, I want to give a shout out. We'll watch this thing with Ben Shapiro because we've got some comments on it from a recent new powerful mutual. But first of all, I want to give a shout out to another one. There's these two guys who have been posting very much over the last several days, and I have agreed with literally every single thing they've posted. And not just agreed, but heartily agreed. They get it. Primarily the no blackpilling thing. One of them here is Andrew Torba from Gab. He says, what you guys need to realize is that Vance is influenceable. We have plenty of people in his orbit. Plenty of our guys can be put into positions of power because he's there. Our focus should be pulling him as far right as possible by 2028. Long game. Honey, not vinegar. This is the entire message in a tweet. We could end it right here. This is the whole message. Another good one from him. He says, a big part of the problem with the extremely online dissident right is that we're all mostly millennials and Zoomers, meaning we're the most impatient people on the planet. I say this as an extremely impatient millennial myself. Power is gained in this country incrementally over time. It's a methodical, long game play, but our generations want everything instantly. We have to be optimistic. We have to have a message of hope. And most importantly, we have to have solutions. It's perfectly fine to point out flaws and bad things when they happen. But be careful about trapping your mind in a perpetual state of it's so over, lest ye miss out on the we're so back. An endless cycle of doom is toxic to the mind, body, and soul.
Yep.
Just pumping out bangers. Another one. If you want to be perpetually demoralized and blackpilled, you should unfollow me. This timeline is for optimists and people who have faith in God's sovereign plan. So shout out to Mr. Torba, and I pray that he keeps it up because he's got a much bigger voice than we do. Another one here. Let's see. I've got another powerful mutual. I'm just going to keep using that until people are tired of hearing it.
As Josiah says, Lindsay is afraid of Vance in the White House, and you're black-pilled?
You're right.
James Lindsay. Huh.
He studied the blade, you know.
Yeah, he did. That guy.
All right, so I'm going to make you guys listen to the little leprechaun here.
On 1.5? No one's going to be able to understand him.
We're going to give it a shot.
Vance speech is getting a lot of attention is his point, and it was also made by the World War II veteran who spoke yesterday, that America is not just an idea, it's a homeland, which of course is absolutely true. Here is Senator Vance.
Okay. Yeah, drop it down.
Yeah, I got to drop
really
it down.
fast as it is.
Yeah.
That sounds like
it's not just an idea, it's a homeland, which of course is absolutely true. Here is Senator Vance last night.
America is not just an idea. It is a group of people with a shared history and a common future. It is, in short, a nation. Now, it is part of that tradition, of course, that we welcome newcomers. But when we allow newcomers into our American family, we allow them on our terms. People will not fight for abstractions, but they will fight for their home. And if this movement of ours is going to succeed, and if this country is going to thrive, our leaders have to remember that America is a nation and its citizens deserve leaders who put its interests first.
Did you know, Cooper, that facts don't care about your feelings? We have a vice presidential candidate saying America is a nation. America is a people. America is not an idea. Can you fathom someone saying this anytime in recent memory?
And what's really interesting about it is like nothing he said is objectionable for a sane person.
Mm-hmm.
But this was no bueno. Like a month ago, you know?
Right. Like this has been one of the primary dog whistles on that's been rooted out and ferreted out across the internet, is saying that America is not an idea, America is a people, is like a signal of the hard divide between the unacceptable right and the acceptable right.
Right.
As Jewboy here is going to let us know.
Okay, now, again, I agree with everything he's saying. I'm just not sure what he's arguing against. Because obviously America is a nation. France is also a nation. Poland is also a nation. Right? When he says that America is a land, yes, so is literally every other land. That's true. And America happens to be the best land. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. It's the best land and it's the best nation. But why? Why?
That's why I want it for myself.
And the answer is the idea that's connected to those things. So he says that America is not just an idea. And of course, that's true. I think the thing that he's arguing against, and here I agree with him, I think the thing he's arguing against is this sort of abstracted idea that Joe Biden uses all the time, where he says it's not who we are. And what he means by that is it's not who the left is. Okay, the attempt to universalize American values in the sense that they can either be exported to Iraq or imported from Guatemala. That's silly and it's wrong. And I think that's what he is saying right there. But when he says that people don't fight for ideas, obviously that's not true. That's certainly not true. I mean, I'm sorry, the Cold War was a war of ideas. It turns out it was not just a war of territories. Otherwise, it would be like most European wars, which are wars of territory. Turns out that people fight for ideas all the time. The idea is connected to the home. That's what makes America a nation. And I think that's what he's trying to say. I hope that's what he's trying to say. Because otherwise, I'm not sure what the exact what is he arguing against? That's really the question that I'm asking here. And I know there are...
Oh, Ben, you know what he's arguing against.
Oh, yes.
You know exactly what he's implying, and you don't like it.
Uh-huh.
That's why you're jumping in.
Uh-huh.
That's why you're chiming in. You're trying to steer the boomers.
So I just realized that he streams this on YouTube. So there's a good chance that if we let it keep playing, it may take it down. I don't know. So we'll just leave it at that. You guys get the idea. You've listened to Ben Shapiro. John Doyle, another guy who's been just popping out bangers. He says Ben knows exactly what he means, and that's why he's posturing as confused and making it about the left or Joe Biden or whatever. We know what it means too. That was a signal to patriots, and we received it. The rest of the world doesn't get to join. Exactly correct. How does that only have... Oh, okay, there we go. I was going to say, does only have 2 retweets. Another one from Comrade Doyle.
Are you seeing Duffhead here in the chat? He says, Vivek just tweeted, quote, "It's finally happening," and tagged his prediction that Biden would not be nominee. Dudes, word is out that Biden will withdraw as early as this weekend.
Huh.
Breaking news.
He says, oh shit, Joe Biden tells BET he would relinquish power to Kamala Harris if he wins a second term and is unable to serve for health reasons, per Bloomberg. Okay, so he's soft withdrawing. Yep, that's the initial leak, and it's happening. Huh. Well, I've been saying that the one thing that really keeps me like open to the idea that he's going to withdraw is Vivek talking about it. And he's been hammering it. He's been hammering it consistently. So if it's going to happen, that's another feather in Vivek's cap. Yeah,
I did see Alex Jones talking about how they're just today that they're going to try to, I don't know if I can say these 2 words together on the YouTubes, but whack
Uh-huh.
Mr. Biden
Uh-huh.
and then try to blame it on Trump supporters.
Uh-huh.
That would be dangerous.
That's what
they could pull. That's like the ace of spades in their sleeve that they could pull.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if it'd go well for them. I don't think it'd go well for anybody, but that would be interesting.
Yeah, that's what
Mr.
one of
Jones assures me it's going to happen.
Our one of our resident Canadians in the Kingpill Discord was speculating that over the a couple days ago. He was like, I don't see how they have any other way around it. Like, it's literally the only way that they could rouse any sort of sympathy and support for him, and they would probably be able to rouse a lot. You know,
right. Because like the left is like the Libs, they're just looking for anything right now, man.
Mm-hmm. The thing with it is that I don't know that there is any longer, like it's going to have to happen fast. And I think it's probably easier to, it's seeming like it would be easier to get him to withdraw on his own. If all of these leaks are all coming out now like this, it's probably going to be easier to get him to withdraw on his own than it is to do that because of the amount of elite support that he's losing.
Yeah, Duffhead says Kamala currently leads Biden in betting markets, as does Whitmer. I strongly despise Gretchen Whitmer.
Probably going to get a it'd be Kamala Buttigieg or Kamala Whitmer probably.
Oh, no way is that ticket going to win.
Right. Like, this is the thing, is like they're hosed either way. It doesn't really matter. And I think that's why a lot of as we were just talking about, the Democratic lawmakers and a lot of the elite support is just like, all right, it's going to be Trump. That's fine. All right, let's move on. So, yeah, this is going to be very interesting. Yeah, John Doyle is definitely our guy and a very effective communicator. He says, you must understand that most of the people you'll listen to between now and November want to lose the election. Like how all these leftist outlets had layoffs after Trump, right-wing pundits do better when Americans are losing, more anxious and looking for answers. And I think he absolutely nails it. A lot of these talking heads that you listen to, this is why the no blackpilling thing is such a useful filter. No fucking blackpilling. Because the people who are blackpilling, the people who are in this position, who they want to lose the election, they're not going to be optimistic about it because they don't want it, and they know that being optimistic about it is part of how you manifest it.
Right.
So this is the filter. Anybody who's blackpilling is revealing to you that they want Trump to lose. And everything that comes with that. They've made their peace with that.
No Goonix.
And they want it for the rest of us too. No Goonix. Goonicry is gay. Now, this is not a powerful mutual, but this is... Man, we've talked about art and artists. How's this?
Mm-hmm.
Fucking Sam Hyde weighs in. Sam Hyde is now is being a poster. He's a long-form poster. This is a response to John Carmack, who said, I'm sad to see the glee that some on the right have at the opportunity to deploy cancel culture over post-assassination attempt comments. I'm a hardcore free speech advocate, and I look at it like germ warfare. It's bad for the whole ecosystem. People like to think that they would fight and die for their sacred principles. This is low-stakes practice. The actors will say, those aren't my sacred principles. I'm going to punch back at my enemy. But to the people at the margin, maybe the principle is important to you. Maybe you shouldn't cheer for an online mob. And so here's a tweet from Dana Steele, August of 2019. I don't even know if I can read this tweet out loud on YouTube without getting the channel taken down. I'm going to give it a shot. She says, what if we rounded up all suspected white domestic supremacist terrorists and took their kids from them and put them in camps and molested and starved them? Just curious.
Jesus.
He says, he's speaking to John Carmack. He says, you don't know what you're talking about.
Too many icks. Domestic, supremacistic. Too many.
It's giving you the ick.
Too many suffixes.
These people have spent the past decade proving that they are irredeemably ugly inside, and they won't relent until they can make you feel some semblance of the pain and bitterness they feel every day towards God for making them fucked up freaks. The only time they care about... Have you read this tweet?
Oh, yes.
Okay. The only time they care about rules, civility, unity, etc. is when those things can be used to handcuff you while your kids are trans and your money is stolen to pay for some fag war or some group of people that hates you and is replacing you. There is no reconciliation. We are not gleeful and we're not out for blood. We just know that we cannot live with these people anymore. Their moral lassitude is the reason why American cities are unlivable. Their virtue signaling comes at the expense of child abuse, medical malpractice, and a couple 100,000 dead Ukrainians. They will always play dirty no matter how much we play fair. They need to be politically disenfranchised, publicly shamed. They need to be properly trained with electric shock therapy to keep their fucking mouths shut. These are not people who think critically from first principles. They are the mob you speak of. They are mob mentality incarnate. That is why they are called normies, NPCs, and the like. The idea of them exercising free speech is a joke because the only thing loaded into their software is CNN talking points. I think you are overthinking things. Your last game, Rage, was very bad. In fact, I would go so far as to call it penis poop. What I would suggest you do is stop being a little fucking pencil-neck dork defending people wishing your president was dead, you're being a smarty pants, and get back to making games that are actually good, as that is something we're all in desperate need of right now. This is what is... When I see something like this is what tells me that nukes actually exist. Because I just saw one. Fucking Sam Hyde just screwed off this man's head and took a massive shit straight down his neck. And boy howdy, do we need it. This is... Masculinity has been gone for a long time. Masculinity is on the rise, ladies and gentlemen. It is on the very sharp rise. And I hope that it continues. I hope it also stays contained. Because masculinity is explosive. And I would prefer that we have the minimal amount of explosiveness necessary.
I'm so horny with all these euphemisms.
It's oh man, it's great looking at the replies. All the good people are all replying,
It's not a
all
euphemism.
agreeing.
An innuendo. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, if I did not know that I could love Sam Hyde more than I already did, but there's something about the artist when the artist decides to cut loose, it is pristine, glistening, absolutely epic. Okay, I got a couple more things here. Let's see. Oh, why did I not get the other tweet? Oh, yeah, perfect. It's here. So, couple from... We're doing the Powerful Mutual tour here because now we've got Orrin McIntyre and Wade Stotts. So, Orrin McIntyre had quote tweeted Colin Wright about being against cancel culture matters most when you have the power to cancel. He says, I would like to live in a world where politics doesn't consume every aspect of our lives, but the left will keep getting people fired, arrested, and killed as long as they can do so without consequence. There can be no peace in the culture war without victory.
Yep.
And Acteon Press says, then you should be fighting against depoliticization, not just the left wing. And he says, defeating the left is the only path to depoliticization.
Politicization.
Politicization. Yeah, depoliticization. What a terrible word. It's a fucking terrible concept. You can't even get a word good enough for it. America contains two opposing moral visions. Only one can hold primacy. That's the thing about a moral vision, especially when each moral vision is totalizing. You can defeat the left or be ruled by them. And then another, he says, politics isn't Mr. Smith goes to Washington. It's a knife fight, always has been. Jefferson's campaign called Adams a hideous hermaphroditical character. Adams' campaign declared Jefferson the son of a half-breed Indian squaw. And this, he tweeted, in response to this happening, Matt Gaetz.
What night are you speaking?
So he's talking to Kevin McCarthy, former Speaker of the House and representative of the dying conservative Inc., and he's shit-talking him on the floor.
Speaking. What night are you speaking? Are you speaking tonight? Or one person? No. Hey, you're not. If you took that stage, you would get booed off of it. You would get booed off the stage.
Now, the background to this is Matt Gaetz was prominent in the campaign to remove Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House and replace him with Mike Johnson. Now, Mike Johnson has been not much of an improvement, but part of this, I think, is it was simply a matter of kneecapping a powerful figure to get him out of the way. And if you get another figure in the way who says it does a lot of the same things, but he's beholden to you, then so be it. Wade Stott said, I get the nostalgia for civility in politics, but right now I think more congressmen should have 80s movie high school bully energy.
Mm-hmm.
I very much agree. I endorse it. Even though I'm not, and they said it's what the founders intended, I'm not the biggest Matt Gaetz fan. I know a lot of people who know him and respect him, and I respect him. I like personally just kind of don't, I don't know.
His suits bother me.
Yeah, and his
They're way too
plastic
tight.
surgery or whatever that he's had recently is not good.
The suits are way too tight.
Yeah.
He looks like a toddler with big feet because he wears like the skinny dress pants. And then he's got these long, goofy shoes with the square toe, and he looks like he has duck feet.
He is absolutely a bougie populist millennial. That's very much his whole vibe.
I hate it.
Vengeful son indeed, though. This is very much there's personal hostility there. I mean, it's being done for the cameras, obviously, but there is personal hostility there. Okay, so I've got 3 remaining things now. These are a little more long form. The first one is an interesting thread that I read last night. Richard No works with OpenAI. Never seen him before. Followed by some mutuals. He's very much a Gray Tribe representative. We're getting the Gray Tribe representative here. He says, I'm trying to understand what a Trump administration would look like, and it's been useful to interpret Vivek Ramaswamy and J.D. Vance as conducting an extended debate with each other about that via their speeches. Now, this is particularly interesting here because Vivek and Vance are close friends and have been for a long time. Some examples. Vivek's common refrain is encapsulated in his RNC speech, America was founded on ideals, and we need to get back to them. He's got a video of him talking about it. Vance recently critiqued this type of rhetoric. Quote, one of the things you hear people say, even on our side, is that America is an idea. But America is not just an idea. America is a nation. It's a group of people with a common history and a common future. This disagreement comes through more substantively in their positions on immigration. Vance argues in the video above that immigration exacerbates the housing crisis, and in his interview with Ross Duhat, that it drives down wages for U.S. workers and prevents innovation. Vivek calls out Vance's position explicitly in his national conservatism speech, labeling it national protectionism. Instead, he wants more focus on ensuring immigrants assimilate, but still believes that they promote America's economic growth. Vivek's speech is very idea-dense, and practically the whole thing can be seen as a critique of Vance's views in favor of Vivek's national libertarian stance. Perhaps the biggest clash comes in their positions on the regulatory state, whether to redirect it or dismantle it. Here's Vance advocating for redirecting it. Fire every mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, and replace them with our people. But Vance supports keeping regulators who are doing a good job, most notably Lena Khan, head of the FTC. Why Khan? Vance is wary about big tech and wants strong antitrust, e.g. breaking up Google. Quote, there's this weird idea that something can't be tyrannical if it happens via a free market. These companies control the flow of information in our country. Vivek calls out Vance's support of Khan explicitly in his national conservatism speech, arguing that regulators shouldn't be given such extensive powers and that the regulatory state is the original root of many corporate dysfunctions it tries to prevent. Shut it down. Zooming out, Vance is closer to Trump's positions and is trying to make a coherent intellectual stance out of them, while Vivek is closer to the positions of many Silicon Valley Trump supporters like Musk, Thiel, and Andreessen. So we should expect the jockeying to continue. Notably, though, Trump's Silicon Valley supporters mostly aren't involved with the biggest tech companies. Andreessen has even staked out an agenda that explicitly distinguishes big tech from little tech, aka startups. So maybe there's common ground. As an outsider, it's fascinating to watch these two very smart politicians trying to steer an ideology in real time. The whole thing seems very collegial. There's camaraderie in being the upstarts. I greatly appreciate pointers to the closest analog on the Democrat side. I don't know if he said this rhetorically or if he's genuinely this, like autistic, because there is no closest analog on the Democrat side.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't exist. This guy here says he has a whole long thread about this, but advisory councils for tech luminaries, since Tim Cook is not quitting his job to be in the cabinet. Same applies for cabinet members, though. General McMaster, Rex Tillerson, competent experts who left because they could not accomplish things under him. Okay, let me see actually the full thing of what he was saying. He said there's a policy debate happening between hangers-on, but it's more useful to look at the evidence of his previous administration and predict that this one will be similarly reactive, substanceless, and legislatively barren. Random, toothless executive orders and agency thrash.
Maybe, but as if nothing has changed.
Right. Like the people who he's surrounded with that are coming in now are explicitly calling that out and saying this is the most important thing to ensure it doesn't happen. Yeah, you could say this is all just rhetoric, but at some point it's kind of like, is it really just rhetoric? So Richard said, I think that Trump has now mobilized enough competent elites to get a lot of stuff done during a second administration. Talent is always the bottleneck. Also, describing his VP pick as a hanger-on seems inaccurate. He said, not inaccurate, very intentional. VP always a vestigial politician, doubly so in Trump admin. It's gratifying to imagine that Vance pick signals our influence via tech, Thiel, etc., but in actuality, his biggest qualification is his statement he would have rejected 2020 electors. This guy just does not get it. This is a great example of the autist looking at this and not picking up on everything that's going on around it. He said it would be amazing if talent was the bottleneck in politics, but more likely the bottleneck is the institutional inertia of the executive bureaucracy and the outright dysfunction of the legislature. And anyway, if talent were the bottleneck, that's not the fundamental problem. This is the same thing. He's picking nits here, but he's describing the same thing. Tons of industry talent, tech luminaries on Trump's various councils, last admin, all quit, none returning because they realized he wasn't interested in or capable of heeding them. He just wanted their clout, wanted them to be barnacles on a ship he steered by the day's whim. For another executive, an analysis of cabinet backers' influences would have strong predictive power. Not for this one, whose demonstrated behavior is to act on simple egoic self-interest and regularly backstab supporters. People cannot influence him. So there's an example of the who I would consider another gray tribe guy who just doesn't get it. He says, counterpoint from JP, would either of them actually be able to get stuff done under Trump? The number of people who broke ranks with him during after his previous administration suggests otherwise. So that perspective is very ignorant of the historical terms of the debate that's going on. These people are completely oblivious to basically our corner of the internet.
Right. I was just about to say, like, they don't understand, like, the whole worldview and the history over the past 10 years that is, like, developed and, argued and et cetera, in our circle of the internet, which influences both these people and especially Vance. And they're completely cut off from that, so they don't have any of that context.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just they're looking like, oh, he says this thing, he says this thing. And they're trying to model, like, based off of what this guy says and what this guy says, what's that going to mean for the future? Oh, but you have to look at how people acted in Trump's last administration. And it's like, man, you guys are missing a whole piece of the pie because you're scared of internet racists or something.
You're right. It's like executive is just like a category of person that behaves in a completely consistent way. There's no like executive that has these priorities versus executive that has these priorities, executive that's beholden to these interests versus these interests. He said, lastly, on AI, Vance's pro-open source position is consistent with his wariness about big tech. I've heard that Vivek hasn't been following AI as much, but I expect he'll come to a similar conclusion. I have mixed feelings about this, but as per thread below, I don't think people's current positions are very predictive of where they'll end up once AI progress accelerates even further. I'm sad that the open source debate has become so polarized, but I've talked to many people on both sides and generally found them very thoughtful and genuine. So in the long term, I expect convergence to a shared sensible position. We'll do another thread on this soon.
No, probably not.
Yeah. Here's a great interview by Ezra Klein of Orrin Cass, a Vance-aligned Republican strategist. So an interesting, I do think that he's pointing out a substantial difference between Vivek and Vance in terms of approach. But I think this also sets up an interesting dialectic, because a dialectic can be used to control the conversation and ensure you're getting two selected outcomes, both of which you can work with, but both of them are controlled and put forth by the same backing, more or less.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if the debate was just between those two, that wouldn't be too bad a place to be.
Right. They both have the same fundamental values, and then they're arguing like the national libertarian versus populist protectionist. Like those are two camps that I would be happy to be. And I actually kind of think that may be a forecasting of what the American political system is moving toward. One side that's much more libertarian, but like libertarian nationalist. The other side is much more populist and protectionist, sovereigntist. I don't know exactly what you would call it, but that's sort of the trajectory that it seems things are moving. All right, I got two things to read through here. Neither one of them is super long. And I've got 50 minutes until I'm going to be going live with the Old Glory Club. So we're gonna crank through these as quickly as possible. First one from the Z-Man. America First. This was something he posted today. He says, most of the people who use the phrase America First do so emotively as a way to indicate that they like or dislike something. They will use this phrase, for example, when dismissing something or someone from the left. Alternatively, they will use it as a way to restate allegiance to their cause. I'm America First reduces to, I'm on the side of the good guys and those people are the bad guys. Beyond this basic political signaling, the phrase has little meaning for the users. This is not true of everyone. Trump and his more reliable supporters use the phrase to mean a radical reorientation of the political class. What Trump means when he says he wants an American first foreign policy, for example, is that he looks at foreign policy in service to his domestic policy. The same is true with trade. He promotes the use of tariffs, for example, because he thinks about trade as a means to an end, and that end is the promotion of the American domestic economy.
Right.
The radicalism of this gets lost because both sides of the political class have mischaracterized these positions for half a century. So-called conservatives talk about free trade, a thing that does not exist, as enlightened policy, while tariffs are slandered as isolationism and central planning. The left now promotes endless wars around the globe as a necessary duty of the American government, even if it comes with a heavy cost to the American people. One reason that government policy now feels anti-white is because it generally feels anti-American. But in reality, it is simply indifferent to white Americans. The thing that has consumed the Biden presidency has been Ukraine, followed by the endless wars in the Levant, and then their escalations with China. Whenever the concerns of white people come up, they're blasted with the tired old slogans that are simply meant to dismiss the concerns of the majority population. Immigration is another example. The logic behind open borders is not that it is good for the native population, but that the people enabling it are doing a good deed for these foreigners and humanity in general. While much of it is driven by spite and ingratitude, the underlying cause is indifference to domestic concerns. For the typical person in the political system, the concerns of average Americans matter only insofar that they have an impact on these cosmopolitan projects. This is why the usual suspects screech in horror at Trump. He is a threat not just to their specific schemes, but to the framework in which they operate. For example, he looks at Ukraine and asks why Americans are paying for it. If the Europeans want to make war with each other, according to Trump, they should pay for it. In other words, he looks at the Ukraine situation purely in terms of domestic economics. The starting question for Trump is, how is this good for Americans? This is most obvious in his statements regarding Taiwan. In a recent interview, Trump pointed out that Taiwan is rich mostly because of America, so they should pay for their own defense against China. He also criticized prior administrations for allowing Taiwan to corner the market on high-end computer chips. Trump feels no moral or emotional commitment to Taiwan. For him, it is just another transactional relationship that is either good or bad for Americans. Even with regards to Israel, the area where Trump gets most criticized by dissidents, his view is purely transactional. He looks at Israel as part of the greater Jewish lobby in America, so he treats it as such. The Jews have a lot of money and power, so Trump caters to them in the same way he caters to other powerful interests. If evangelicals stop worshiping Jewish people, Trump will be less enthusiastic for Israel because Israel stops being important domestically. I think this is a really good, really salient point.
Yeah.
And the people who are spurging out about Israel constantly they're just like mirror image evangelicals. They're obsessed about Israel from a negative perspective versus being obsessed about them from a positive perspective. But ultimately, they're maintaining the fear of this relationship. Fear? Fervor? Fearer? F-U-R-O-R is the word I'm looking for, but it's kind of funny that F-O-R-O-R. An outbreak of public anger or excitement. Furor. Yeah, furor.
Furor.
Yeah, that is how you pronounce it. One example of this recently was the report that Netanyahu is desperately trying to work back into Trump's good graces because Trump who notoriously holds very long grudges, does not like the way that Netanyahu pivoted. At the moment I was talking about earlier, where you come up to the precipice and everyone waits and stops and looks at what everyone else is going to do, and then they all just kind of make the move at the same time. And the move Netanyahu made was recognizing Biden as the new president. The whole election, there's all the questions, everything, but it's time to put everything behind us and come together and move forward. Trump took that personally, and he holds it against him. He was quoted as saying, with respect to Netanyahu, "Fuck him." So,
good.
This is an example of the transactional relationship that Trump has with them. J.D. Vance also takes this transactional view of trade and foreign policy, which is why the usual suspects detest him. When asked about Ukraine during his Senate run, he shrugged and asked why anyone cares about Ukraine. Vance has also talked about using tariffs as a way to bring manufacturing back, as well as a way to boost the American economy in general. This kind of talk around the usual suspects is like wearing garlic around a vampire. The reason this terrifies official Washington is that all of their projects, and therefore their reason to exist, rest on the assertion that overseas concerns are paramount because they serve the interests of the empire. If politics moves to a debate about what is and what is not good for the American people, suddenly these schemes not only stop making sense, but they also sound un-American. Project Ukraine, for example, is exactly what Washington warned about in his farewell address. That is the root of the rage we see in the political class. Trump and now Vance signal a shift back to an older form of politics where candidates promised a chicken in every pot and 2 cars in every garage. Patronage. This is antithetical to the cosmopolitical politics that have dominated for at least the last 30 years. A successful politician of old actually had to know something about chickens, pots, and cars. Contrast that to now when politicians take pride in having no practical knowledge. None of this should lead to a celebration. The odds of Trump winning are not good despite all of the good things breaking his way. The mere fact that he is in a close race with a nursing home patient shows how much damage has been done to the self-respect and intelligence of the voting public. Even if Trump wins, the political machine will simply work harder to undermine his efforts. The usual suspects are terribly smart, but they never take no for an answer. I think that's supposed to say the usual suspects aren't terribly smart, but they never take no for an answer. Even so, this all points to the problem with empire. All empires are eventually controlled by an alien elite that parasites off the people who made the empire. As the cost of empire exceeds the benefit of the empire, the people at the top begin to hollow out that which makes them possible. In this regard, the Trump-Vance ticket is a symptom and a warning of what lies ahead. Either the reformist elements of the oligarchy embrace America first, or something much worse than Trump comes next.
Oh, yeah.
So this was written by the Z-Man. I'll drop the link
Something
in there.
like a Caesar, maybe.
Indeed.
A real populist.
Uh-huh.
A Roman populist. Because they didn't listen to... What was the dude's name? Gracchi?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. They killed Gracchi, and then they got themselves a Caesar.
Yes.
The Optimates were not very happy about that.
But
listened.
There's a very good video that Uber Boyo just did on this within the last week, talking about the rise of an American Caesar. And he goes into all the different social dynamics that led to the rise of Caesar and how closely they parallel where we're at right now. So you should listen to that one as well as the one that he did with What If Alt Hist. Let me check the comments here. I saw 2-Bit Podcast said something. He said, I talked about this with Yarvin. We need to create the desire for order. Pretty much any order will do. Yes, right. So if that means creating an order dialectic to synthesize some order, then let's do it. Imagine if, like, Ben Shapiro and Vivek represented the leftist vanguard in American politics. I think that's the trajectory that we may be moving toward. They may be the left of the middle of the mainstream, but
okay. Vivek in what the libertarian sense?
The libertarian sense, yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, Caesar and parallels to where we are now. Okay, here, I'll just pull it up real quick. And then we got one last one to listen to. I've still got 45 minutes.
Comparative advantage is bullshit. I don't care what you say, Vivek.
Yes. Uber Boyo, Caesar. Man,
Go tariffs. Big fan of tariffs.
Here is...
Let's do tariffs.
There's the Uber Boyo one. Okay. So, the last thing we're going to read is from Politico. The 7 thinkers and groups that have shaped J.D. Vance's unusual worldview. Post-liberals, crunchy-cons, and monarchists. This is posted 7/18/2024. So we have Politico talking about how the vice president is influenced by monarchists. J.D. Vance represents something genuinely unusual for the MAGA movement. A national Republican who is deeply enmeshed with the elite world of the conservative intellectual movement, or what's sometimes termed for convenience as the new right or the dissident right. So all of these guys who see themselves as adjacent to the new right or dissident right, your enemies think that J.D. Vance is one of you. They don't think that he is one of them. They think he's one of you. Mm-hmm. As Vance himself confessed earlier this year, he is, quote, plugged into a lot of weird right-wing subcultures. His transition from Never Trump conservative to MAGA firebrand was influenced by his relationships with a handful of niche conservative writers and thinkers. Among them are people who push for post-liberal regime change, some who pine for the cultural conservatism of Viktor Orban's Hungary, and one outright monarchist. This cohort espouses a variety of sometimes competing viewpoints, but they are bound together by the belief that the liberal project of progress, especially in the form of economic liberalization, technological advancement, and the leveling of social hierarchies, has in fact been a mistake. Based. Many of these thinkers are still far, far away from being household names. But with Vance at the top of the GOP ticket, they're only one step away from having a direct line to the White House. Like, you think in 2016, Steve Bannon was probably like the most radical person associated with Trump's White House. Yeah. And he got thrown out on his ass pretty quickly. Now, Steve Bannon is almost like the moderate. Here are the key thinkers who have influenced J.D. Vance's intellectual trajectory, and if November goes Republicans' way, could define the trajectory of the country. Patrick Deneen. A professor of political theory at the University of Notre Dame, Deneen rose to prominence in 2018 with the publication of his book, Why Liberalism Failed, a sweeping critique of small L liberalism and a forceful argument for a more communitarian approach to American political life. In the book, which won plaudits from Barack Obama and the New York Times, Deneen argued that liberalism's focus on individualism, secularism, and free markets economics eroded the communal bases of American life, namely the nuclear family, shared religious faith, and local economies. Now, this is interesting that they highlight that the book won plaudits from Barack Obama and the New York Times. This is for multiple reasons. Number one, because this is Politico lending legitimacy to it. By associating Patrick Deneen and his book with positive things from Barack Obama and the New York Times, they're saying it's okay to see this guy as non-threatening. Deneen took a more radical approach in his next major book, Regime Change, published in 2023. In the book, Deneen, who is a conservative Catholic, argued for a, quote, peaceful revolution to replace liberalism with a, quote, post-liberal order, grounded in the promotion of conservative and religious values rather than the protection of individual rights. In practice, Deneen argued for, quote, pro-family and, quote, pro-worker economic policies like tariffs and manufacturing incentives, as well as foreign policy isolationism and strict social conservatism, including limits on gay marriage, gender-affirming care, and abortion. Vance has publicly cited Deneen as a major intellectual influence and even appeared on a panel with him at the book launch for Regime Change, hosted at Catholic University in 2023. At the event, Vance identified himself as a member of the post-liberal right and said he views his role in Congress as explicitly anti-regime, channeling Deneen's critic of liberal progressivism. In a statement after Vance's selection, Deneen praised him as, quote, a man of deep personal faith and integrity, a devoted family man, a generous friend, and a genuine patriot. Peter Thiel. Thiel is best known as Vance's former venture capital boss and the primary funder of his 2022 Senate campaign, but he is also a close friend and major intellectual influence for Vance. The duo's relationship began in 2011 when Vance, then a student at Yale Law School, attended a talk by Thiel in which he tied Silicon Valley's failure to deliver truly revolutionary technologies to the stagnation of America's political and social elites. As Vance later wrote of Thiel's vision, quote, he saw these two trends, elite professionals trapped in hyper-competitive jobs and the technological stagnation of society, as connected. If technological innovation were actually driving real prosperity, our elites wouldn't feel increasingly competitive with one another over a dwindling number of prestigious outcomes. Now, if that sounds familiar, the thing they're linking to here is the article that we read the other night from thelampmagazine.com, How I Joined the Resistance, which is Vance describing his conversion. I can't say it enough. Go back and listen to that if you haven't already. Thiel's political outlook is complex and contradictory, but it revolves around the idea that misguided liberal ideology, sclerotic government bureaucracy, and feckless elites have perverted the trajectory of technological progress, turning technology into a tool of national and civilizational destruction rather than renewal. As Thiel famously put it, we wanted flying cars, instead we got 140 characters. Vance has not explained publicly exactly how much of Thiel's worldview he shares, but the two men are close friends and regular conversation partners. Quote, my relationship with Peter is what it has been for close to 15 years that I've known him, Vance told Politico magazine earlier this year. If there's something interesting going on and I want to bounce ideas off a very fascinating and knowledgeable person, I'll give him a call. That's what's known as a mentor. Curtis Yarvin. Yarvin doesn't hold any official title or office. He's an ex-computer programmer turned blogger, having first risen to prominence on the online right in the 2010s while blogging under the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug. But he's often cited as the house philosopher of the new right, chiefly for his promotion of the neo-reactionary or NRX movement. Like Deneen, Yarvin and his NRX followers reject the quest for it's funny, his NRX followers reject the quest for progress as the core of political life. As Yarvin told Vanity Fair in 2022, the fundamental premise of liberalism is that there is this inexorable march toward progress. I disagree with that premise. Instead, Yarvin believes that American democracy has degenerated into a corrupt oligarchy, run by elites who strive to consolidate their power rather than serve the public interest. The solution, Yarvin argues, is for the American oligarchy to give way to a monarchical leader styled after a startup CEO, a, quote, national CEO, or what's called a dictator, as Yarvin has put it, who can debug the American political order like a computer programmer debugging some bad code. Vance has said he considers Yarvin a friend and has cited his writings in connection with his plan to fire a significant number of civil servants during a potential second Trump administration. There's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who has written about some of these things, Vance said on a conservative podcast in 2021, adding, I think Trump is going to run again in 2024, and I think that what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, and replace them with our people. Real quick, hailing back to the thing about Vance and Vivek, when you set up this dialectic here, so if you have Vivek, who's coming in and saying, fire all of them, abolish the position, eliminate the department, get rid of it all, go completely scorched earth and kill it. And then you have Vance saying, let's fire them all and replace them with our people. Then you have Vivek as the radical extremist, and you can be like, whoa, that guy's, he's excitable. He's excitable. He's getting ahead of himself. You know, these things still serve a purpose.
So
We're
then
gonna get them
Vance
our
seems
people.
he seems like the reasonable guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. René Girard, a French-born philosopher and Catholic literary critic, Girard taught for several decades at Stanford University, where his acolytes included Peter Thiel. Thiel, in turn, introduced Girard's ideas to his own protege. Vance has said that he was particularly influenced by Girard's idea of mimetic rivalry, the idea that humans want certain things because they see other people wanting those same things, and his related idea of the scapegoat myth, that this competition for shared goals and objects leads to social and political conflict, which most societies ultimately resolve by committing an act of violence against a perceived outsider. To Girard, early Christians were the first group to escape this cycle of violence because they scapegoated one of their own, Jesus Christ, rather than an outsider. It is, 2-Bit Podcast is in the chat right now. It is surreal reading Politico describing mimetic rivalry. It is beyond surreal. And they're doing it with respect to the presumptive vice president. This is beyond surreal. Vance has credited his exposure to Girard via Thiel as a major impetus for his conversion to Catholicism in 2019. Yes, they did get it wrong, by the way. Yes. Mired in the swamp of social media, we identified a scapegoat and digitally pounced. We were keyboard warriors, unloading on people via Facebook and Twitter, blind to our own problems. We fought over jobs we didn't actually want while pretending we didn't fight for them at all, Vance wrote in a 2020 essay. That all had to change. It was time to stop scapegoating and focus on what I could do to improve things. Vance's conversion, however, hasn't put an entire stop to his days of online trolling. What is that a link to? Coming up on MSNBC, talk of inflation is violence against the non-binary community. Sohrab Ahmari. The writer Sohrab Ahmari's political evolution is arguably even more circuitous than Vance's. The son of a secular Iranian family, he emigrated to the U.S. as a teenager, became a Trotskyist in college, then took up the neoconservative cause as an editor at the Wall Street Journal before converting to Catholicism in 2016. The same year, he voted for Hillary Clinton out of disgust for Trump. He has since moved rightward, embracing Trump and becoming a chief advocate for a new style of working-class conservatism that has its roots in the tradition of Catholic social democracy, which Ahmari describes, half-jokingly, as pro-life New Dealism. Now he's the co-editor of Compact Magazine, an online journal that nominally brings together the populist right and left, but which has assertively promoted both Trump and Vance. Ahmari, meanwhile, remains close with Vance, having profiled him for several publications and hosted him at a buzzy conference for common good conservatives in 2022. This is another guy, if I was kind of speculating a little bit about the trajectory that we're moving toward, and I said like Vivek and Ben Shapiro might sort of bring up the more left-wing side of things, or occupy the role that the left does now, the outer party, I would say that Ahmari would be similar to that. In an interview with Politico magazine after Trump's selection, Ahmari said he was thrilled to have Vance on the ticket. Donald Trump could have listened to the advice of many other characters and picked a conventional Republican, he said. Instead, he picked someone who is reviled by the keepers of the orthodoxy on free trade and foreign policy, and who is also in line with the kind of RNC platform that we saw released last week. He added, if you want to push that platform, JD is the man to do it. And, continuing, the Claremont Institute. Based out of San Bernardino County, California, the Claremont Institute has become the intellectual nerve center of the Trumpist right since 2016, serving as the home to scholars like Michael Anton, whose infamous 2016 Flight 93 essay offered an early intellectual justification for Trump, as well as former Trump attorney John Eastman, who has been indicted for his role in trying to overturn the 2020 election. Aside from its embrace of Trumpism, the Institute is known as the home of West Coast Straussianism, a school of American political philosophy pioneered by the conservative historian and philosopher Henry V. Jaffa. The Institute's scholars and fellows hold a range of political positions, but they are united by the belief that America lost touch with its founding ideas somewhere around the Progressive era. Driven by government bureaucratization, the loss of public faith in the principles of natural law, and the rise of moral relativism and multiculturalism, what could be called wokeism in today's parlance. Unlike Yarvin or Deneen, the Claremont crew tend to advocate a return to founding American principles like limited government and the protection of natural rights. In practical terms, this has led them to enthusiastically take up Trump's crusade against the administrative state and woke initiatives like DEI and critical race theory. Vance is closely tied to Claremont circles, frequently speaking at their events and appearing alongside their scholars. In a statement to the American Conservative on Monday, Claremont President Ryan Williams called Vance the ideal pick for Trump's vice president, adding, "It's hard to find a more articulate and passionate advocate for the politics and policies that will save American democracy from the forces of progressive oligarchy and despotism." Rod Dreher. The Orthodox Christian writer and former American conservative columnist is best known as the leader of the Crunchy Cons, the Birkenstocked Burkeans, and gun-loving organic farmers, who embrace the countercultural, back-to-the-land attitudes typically associated with the hippie left, but are themselves on the intellectual right. Dreher subsequently made a national splash with his 2017 book, The Benedict Option, which counseled Christian conservatives to quote, embrace exile from the mainstream culture and construct a resilient counterculture, end quote, based on the Christian virtues. Since then, he has relocated primarily to Hungary, where he has become something of an intellectual consigliere in Viktor Orban's government. His latest book, which got a friendly plug from Vance, is subtitled A Manual for Christian Dissidents. Dreher's friendship with Vance began in 2016 when Dreher became an early champion of hillbilly elegy on the right, calling it one of the best books I've ever read, and conducting a much-talked-about interview with Vance for the American Conservative. Dreher's blog got booted from the magazine last year after his primary funder thought it had gotten too weird. The two remained friends, and Dreher even attended Vance's baptism into the Catholic faith in Ohio in 2019. "I need to send our next vice president a copy of the Benedict Option," Dreher joked online after Vance's selection. So those are the intellectual influences that Politico feels most relevant to point out. The intellectual influences on JD Vance. I wanted to see. It said his primary funder thought it had gotten too weird. I want to see what he was. What's that a reference to? Oh my God. Freaking pop-ups. Oh, I can't even read it. Whatever.
Yeah. Let me ruin my website with a pop-up so you can't actually read anything.
Yeah. Thomas Query says Dave Green should do an episode about Amari. I would be interested in hearing him gripe about that. He would be the person to do it. That's right in the distributist's lap. 2-Bit Podcast says Microsoft ditching DEI is big. Don't sleep on it. Is this the thing that will get Nick Land out of hiding? I don't know. That would be interesting.
Nick Land is a weird guy.
Yeah, he is. I enjoy his weirdness, but it's definitely weird. All right. Well, I've got about a half an hour till I'm going to be going live with the Old Glory Club. So go watch that in half an hour. For now, those of you who showed up here, I appreciate you. Thank you for dropping in. Hopefully we entertained you sufficiently. And I will be back here tomorrow morning around 10:30 or so Central Time. Like the stream, please. If you're on Twitter, retweet it. Follow me on Twitter at RoKingPilled. Follow him at Cooper Brooks. And join the Kingpill Discord, kingpill.com. That's the best way you can show your support for us. If you appreciate what we're doing, you want us to keep doing it, and to do it more. We're going to be doing it more. We got more stuff coming. We gotta make time to do the stuff that we're going to do in the future. Anyways, appreciate you guys. Thank you for dropping by, and I'll see you on the Old Glory Club here in about half an hour.